Well, howdy do, and welcome to this surprise Saturday stream. We're gonna continue playing Dead Man's Rest. Okay, wait, hold on. Let me get into character. Welcome. Name's Jackal. I'm the sheriff of fictional men, and we're back to continue Dead Man's Rest. Alright, hold on. This totally is not last minute, totally not. I'm totally prepared. Alright. Alright, let's go. Let's start. That night started just like any other. My arse was sitting on a rattler on my way home to some two-bit town in the back end of nowhere. Golders Rock, they called it, though I never heard of no gold there. Never heard of it at all until 2 days ago. I got a tip from one of my associates that a wanted criminal by the name of Wild Bill McCoy was hiding out there. See, I'm a bounty hunter by trade. I prefer living the drifter's life. Just me and my revolver. Easier that way. You ain't got nothing to lose but your life. Ain't been long since old McCoy and I had a run-in last time. This one's a bit personal. I've wanted to see McCoy dead for a long time. Everyone around here knows he's my target, and they ain't to interfere unless they want a bullet in their face. He got away once, and he ain't doing it twice. So the last time we played this game was like a few months ago. We did Taza's route, so we're gonna see what else is in store from these other characters. Something else was going on that night though, while I was on that dusty train. See, there had been some sort of trouble there. The highfalutin mayor, you see, didn't have too many friends. Seems someone was out to get him. The saloon was full, buckaroos playing cards, cheating cards, and drinking all night long. The mayor was at the bar. He'd been on the red eye since dusk, and at midnight he tipped his hat, tip, and left the saloon all roostered. Hey Jed, have a good night. Bad move for a man with enemies. Guys watched him go, tottering around. Something bad was bound to happen. Oh my god, it's Dead Man's Rest right there! Seems he made it home though, just about the time I drifted into town. First place I went was the saloon, a dirty, crumbling old joint by the name of Dead Man's Rest. Full of guys. The mayor had only just left 5 minutes before I arrived. No man paid me attention except the barkeep, but that was fine with me. I was dragged out. Got myself diggings there for just a few Lincoln skins and settled in. That is nasty. Lincoln skins? Figured I'd rest for the night and set out at sunrise to settle the score with Wild Bill. Ain't no way I could have foresaw what would happen that night, or the kind of men I was about to meet. So we're doing the common route again, because I don't remember what the heck happened, since it's been, again, a few months since I played. Galleon Games and Argent Games. There we are. There's someone. Dead Man's Rest. Is there sound right now? It's very low. Lee McCarthy. Jed Matlock. I'm increasing this volume. Taza. Hollis Dalton. John Cartwright. Mr. John. We got the bad boy here. My computer is humming. I like that. Writing Theo Soundgate. Backgrounds Leslie 63. Sprite CG art. Text is going too fast. Oh god, everyone's crying. Oh, there we go. Brothers in arms. There we go. That's what we like to see. I'm lowering this volume again, because that's loud in my ear holes. Let me know if the sound is silly. I got up the next morning thinking nothing was amiss. Packed up my plunder and headed down to the bar, intending to be out of town and over to Wild Bill's hideout by noon. The barkeep stopped me as I was heading out the door. He was a tall man with long blonde hair and a kind-looking face. Hey stranger, you hear about what happened last night? Didn't hear nothing. Mayor Dalton's gone and been done. Found dead as a doornail first thing. Sheriff's rounding up a bunch of guys for questioning. Old Dalton didn't have a lot of friends. This wasn't good news. Ain't never good news when a shooting happens in the town you're in. Too much attention. And even worse, I was an outsider. For all they knew, I could have been hired to do it. The barkeep was looking at me like he thought I might have been hiding something. I kept his gaze. Sounds like some bad business is going on around here. You could call it that. Best watch your back though, stranger. It seems the streets ain't safe. Especially if they think you did it. What if I just gave him an Australian accent? You think I did it? He looked at me for a long time. Nah. Don't reckon you did. Good. You're clearly a discerning man. I say what I see, and what I see is a stranger who ain't got nothing to do with it. I got my own theories, though. Good to have theories. I ain't involved, though, and want to stay that way. Maybe I'll see you around. Sure. I left the saloon and stepped out into the street. Oh, you can see my mouse. Is that annoying? Is it annoying to be able to see my cursor? But I can point things out. Seems like news spread fast in this little town. People were all over, whispering and pointing. I'm gonna... Hold on, let me turn off this. Or can I progress with the spacebar? Enter? Nope. Well, enter does work. Options. Why does this sound loud? Be quiet. Try that. Oops. What do you say? I spat on the ground. Ptooey. Looked like I was gonna have to make a statement. Show these guys I weren't no killer. At least, not outside of the law. Before I could do anything, though, I heard another voice behind me. Boy, stranger. I want a word with you. This is a stick-up. I turned around to see the sheriff standing square and looking me in the eyes. He had a groomed mustache and slick hair, looking like he took good care of himself. What for? Acknowledge the corn, stranger. I think you know what's going on. Ain't nothing going on as far as I'm concerned, except my job. And what's that? Bringing criminals to justice, same as you. I took out the crumpled wanted poster and showed my bounty hunter's badge from my bag and showed him what the heck I can read. While Bill McCoy ain't gonna turn himself over, so can I get on my way? He didn't look over my... Whoa. He looked over my stuff, then back up at me. He didn't want to let me go easy, especially since folk were watching. I don't trust you, stranger. You're high on the list for who might have committed this crime. Ain't no way I'm letting you skip town. You try to leave, I'll put a bullet in your back. He gave me back my papers and badge, and I put them into my bag. Sounds mighty impressive, but I know you can't shoot no innocent man, Sheriff. You can't prove nothing on me, so your hands are tied. We glared at each other for a minute. He knew he couldn't keep me there. Thing is, the longer he was suspecting me, the less time he was spending looking for the real killer. The longer it took to find the real killer, the longer he'd suspect me. And for that whole time, the harder it'd be to find and kill Bill. I sighed. You want my help, Sheriff? I ain't bad at finding stuff out, and I want justice, same as you. The sheriff didn't look too pleased at that. Keep your nose out and let me do my job, Greenhorn. You don't know anything about these parts. I sized him up. No. But I know a lot about the kind of men I meet. Oh, do you now, Lee McCarthy? Men are the same everywhere, you see, Sheriff. He narrowed his eyes. He knew what I was implying, what I was accusing him of. He spat at my feet. Hutui. I'm handling this investigation, so don't get in my way. And don't leave town. He turned away, spurs clicking, and sauntered off back to the station. Seemed I wasn't going anywhere, so I wheeled round and went back into the saloon. Bill would have to wait. Looked like I had a new job on my hands. The barkeep was washing up when I went back in. He gave me a hard look, but didn't say nothing. I sat down at a table and turned my badge over in my hands. I needed to figure a way out of this before it got ugly. At that point, I overheard two guys sitting at one table over. Yeah, old Hollis. Heard he went to speak to Dalton the other day. Thought them two never spoke. Thought they hated each other. They did, but Hollis was completely soaked the other night and kept going on about family ties and all that bull. Could be there's something fishy there. Shh, not so loud when you're accusing folk. Anyone in this rum hole could hear us. He shot me a glance and I looked down at my badge again. That sure was interesting. Interesting. Some estranged family member who could be involved in this? I thought perhaps that'd be a good place to start investigating. I went to sniff out old Hollis. On the other hand, these leaky mouths probably had no idea. Let's sniff out old Hollis. We know what you are. I couldn't leave it alone or I'd be the one being hemped. I put my badge away and stood up, going over to the barkeep. Yes? I need to know a bit more about this town. Before, ain't you just passing? Got complicated. Yeah, you're telling me. What do you want to know? Who's old Hollis and where can I find him? He laughed. You've been listening to Devin and the guys then? Hollis is a good place to start, I'd say. He's the late mayor's brother. He owns a ranch and plot of 40 acres out the back of town. It's the most land anyone's here's got, save Dalton. He and Dalton didn't speak for 11 years, till the other day. Sus. Nobody knew the BS between them, but nobody wanted to neither. Hollis was in here the other night after seeing Dalton. He had a little too much who hit John and got a wobbling jaw. Started talking about family ties, I hear. He leaned forward and nodded. Being up close to the barkeep, where I could see the color of his eyes, reminded me of something I'd rather forget. A feeling I hadn't had in a long time. It made me uncomfortable, and it was hard to concentrate on listening to him. I didn't get close to people for a reason. It meant you had something to lose. Clearing my head, I tried hard to focus on what he was saying. Spouting off about lost time and how he was so glad to be a family again. See though, as happy as Hollis was, Dalton was depressed. Came in here last night drinking away his sorrows. Something there don't add up right. You think he might have had something to do with it? He moved back again, and I suddenly felt lonely. I didn't realize how much it still affected me. I'd have to watch out for that. Nah, well, I don't know really, but Hollis don't strike me as the type. I mean a lot of folk, and some of them are real mudsills. Hollis, he ain't like that. I can think of someone else, though, who might have done it, though. Oh, yeah? Yeah, I reckon. He motioned me closer, and I tried to keep my face straight. Sheriff Cartwright. He and Dalton were having some kind of political disagreement over the rail. He's got the key to Dalton's house and all, given his position. Would have been easy for him. I thought about it. The sheriff did seem shifty. Could he have murdered the mayor in cold blood and then tried to frame me? Before I jumped to any conclusions, I wanted to speak to Hollis. Perhaps he'd acknowledge the corn on the conversation he had with his brother. Acknowledge the corn! The barkeep returned to washing the dishes. What's your name, by the by? Jedediah Matlock, but just about everyone here calls me Jed. Pleasure. I'm Lee McCarthy. Most know me as Blackjack. Real or fake? He just made that up. You say, what's a cool nickname I can give this dude? The bounty hunter? I'm surprised they'd heard of me. All the way out here in the butt end of nowhere. Yeah, here to pin down Wild Bill McCoy. Okay. Yeah, same, Jed. Jed whistled. Yeah, I heard about that. Is Wild Bill near town then? I wasn't sure I wanted to tell him much more. Oh, I think he got the point. I had to be getting on my way. Yeah, can't get there though until this dang mess is figured out. I'm going to speak to Hollis, see if I can't find out what in the heck happened. Good luck. I tipped my hat and left. Partner? My cowboy? My partner? It was nearly noon by the time I left the saloon, and a lot of people were out and about. Most ignored me, and some stared at me. None of them were half-wit enough to start a fight. Probably a good thing. Didn't want to end up in jail. Yeah, I'm tough. Yeah, I'm tough. My name's Lee McCarthy. And I'm tough. I made my way to the back of town and saw Hollis's ranch in the distance. It was as grand as Jed said. Hollis must be a real big auger. My line of work didn't have me dealing with fancy folk much. Coming to him out of nowhere, a stranger in town. Would he even tell me what the deal was? I sure hope so. Didn't want to be caught in this difficulty for too long. I made my way up to the ranch and knocked. It wasn't long before Hollis came and opened up. I was feeling all overish. Really wasn't used to these big fancy places. When I saw Hollis, I was surprised. I'd expected him to be older, but by gum, he couldn't have been more than 35. He had short, neat hair with a few streaks of gray, and he was taller than me. Looking me over, he casually put out his cigarette. What accent? Who are you? I can't do deep voice. Lee McCarthy, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you. Is it? I could smell alcohol on him. He'd been drinking. This was gonna be tricky. Yeah. Yeah. What do you want from me? A job? Ain't got nothing going on at the moment, unless you're a grub liner. No sir, thank you, but I'm a bounty hunter. I took off my hat. Seems a man like this wanted some respect. I came to extend my deepest condolences about the loss of your brother. His face hardened and he looked me up and down. He didn't seem like someone who was grieving. And again, it sounded like they hadn't been too close. What's it to you? Do you know him? Not personally. I'm new around here. Always sad though when this kind of trouble happens. I was towing the line, trying to keep him talking to me. It's that dang Cartwright's fault. He ain't never done his job proper, and he ain't never listened to us when we tell him there's a problem. Problem? May I ask what kind of problem? Native Americans. They have a reserve a little way out west, and I ain't one to pick trouble. For a long time, they let us alone and we them. Recently, though, I've been losing cattle. Can't be anyone but them. Ain't no coyotes around these parts. I reported it to Cartwright. He don't give a dang to help. Says he's doing things according to Hoyle, and he won't do nothing illegal. So I went to my brother, asking if he'd signed an order to move him on. I never got an answer, and next week he turns up dead. I don't know if it was the natives or Cartwright himself, but something about this don't smell right. I couldn't believe it. Generally, I ain't had much to do with natives. If I left them alone, they didn't cause no trouble. Once or twice, they even helped me out, sharing food and stories while on the road. I didn't have no squabble with them and didn't want to start one. If this was true though, and Cartwright was involved in it, heck, what had I gotten myself into? Hollis had lit up a smoke while waiting on me to respond. Sounds like this ain't no simple matter. Sure as heck ain't, and I still ain't got anyone who'll help me with those natives. What do you want done about it? You know for sure they're the ones taking your cattle? Who else could it be? You know, Wild Bill McCoy and his crew have taken up in these parts. Could be they're trying to start something. Ain't no way a tribe of natives are trying to cause trouble for no reason, right? He eyed me thoughtfully. I suppose you're right. Ain't got no way of making sure, though. I can't go that far out, and for all I know, they'll kill me dead on sight. Suddenly, Hollis looked at me with a gleam in his eye, and I knew what he was about to say. You want to go? There's some greenbacks in it for you. Just talk to them and find out why in the heck they're taking my cattle. I ain't allowed to leave town. Oh, who says? Sheriff Cartwright. Hollis narrowed his eyes at me. So he's trying to frame you for killing my brother, is he? Dang, he had me. I'm just trying to figure out the truth. Then you should start with the natives. What about the sheriff? I'll deal with him. Tell him I got you on the job for Summit. He can't argue with that. Sure, I'll talk to him for you. I don't want no trouble, though. Neither do I. They're just about 2 miles out west, just past the edge of the range. You can take one of my horses. Oh, that's mighty generous of you, Mr. Dalton, sir. I'll expect you back here tonight so you can tell me what in the heck's going on. If you ain't here, you ain't getting paid. Understood. I'll be back. Placing my hat back on, I tipped it and left. We are so courteous. I didn't want to get mixed up in this, but what choice did I have? That Cartwright wasn't going to let me out of town without Hollis's protection. I had to take what I could and hope somewhere down the line I got a chance to find Bill. Saddling and mounting a bay, I headed off towards the reservation. It felt good to be in the saddle again. Since I go so far by train, it ain't easy keeping a horse. Has to be my favorite way to travel. It turned out the natives' territory really was close. Hollis weren't lying, and it wasn't long before I came up on the border. This music. I like this music. I whistled loudly, hoping to indicate my presence peaceably. Hello, stranger! This is the Taza music to me. There he is! Jump scare, Taza jump scare. Hello yourself. My horse reared in surprise. I'm the horse. Some native had appeared right beside me. Apologies for startling you. Ain't no problem, ain't no problem. I was on his turf, so I decided I was gonna start polite. Ain't no reason to start a fuss. What are you doing here, cowboy? I came to ask your chief a question. I held my hands up, but didn't dismount. See, I'm unarmed. The native narrowed his eyes. He weren't fooled. As if you cowboys can't draw your pistols faster than I can blink. Just know that I'm not alone here. He's looking at me so threateningly. If you try to kill me, you'll be shot where you stand. I couldn't see nobody else, but I'd take his word for it. These people were good at hiding. Could be a dozen archers around me and I'd have no idea. Sure. Look, I'm not here to start anything. One of my acquaintances has told me he's had cattle going missing, and he wants to know if it's you. He looked at the ground all overish. He was definitely hiding something. I noticed he was between hay and grass. Can I speak to your chief? No, the chief does not meet with just anybody. Can you get the chief to come here then? No, I can answer your question. Who are you anyway, boy? Do you have the authority to deal with me? He stood tall and looked at me square. I'm Taza, son of the chief. I can speak for the tribe. Excellent. Then please, can you tell me if you are the ones who have been taking the cattle? He hesitated for a moment. He really didn't want to acknowledge the corn. It is. Will you hear why? Ain't got no choice. If you really got the backup you say you got. An arrow flew past my face. My horse whinnied and, a little jittered myself, I gently calmed her, then looked back at the boy. Tell me what's going on here. Why are you breaking up years of peace? We didn't break it. You Americans are attacking us. Which? We don't know him. He isn't from town. He leads a group of men, attacking us and stealing our food. We had to take the cattle to survive. I felt sorry for the boy, but it weren't right for them to be stealing Hollis's cattle, regardless of the circumstances. They should have sent someone to talk to town. I gotta go back and tell the man who owns them cattle, and it's up to him now how this all plays out. Gotta say though, it probably ain't gonna be good. His face twisted up with guilt and fear. Can you plead our case? Tell him we're only doing it to survive. I thought about it for a moment. These poor folks were trying to live their lives peaceably, but were having their food taken away. Most likely by Wild Bill, just like the rest of us. A man can't stand by and let that kind of thing happen. Even to a native. Look here, I'm gonna tell ya. The man who's attacking you, that's Wild Bill McCoy. We're just assuming. He's an outlaw, and I'm after him as much as you are. I'll do my best when I get back to town to find him and bring him to justice. Then you won't need to take no more cattle. I know where he is. I could take you to him right now. His face is so funny here. He's like, yes! If you kill him or drive him away, you can recover the value of what we took from them, and we can return to where we were before all this. I looked up at the sky. It'd be getting dark pretty soon, and here I was on Hollis's horse, promising I'd be back. It looks pretty bright to me. If I went with them, ain't no way I was getting back tonight, and I'd probably be branded a thief. Maybe even run out of town or thrown in jail if I tried to go back. Who's to say I had to go back, though, once I had Bill? All I had to do was kill him. Then my job was done. I could leave and go back where I came from. It felt wrong to take another man's horse and to choose natives' problems over my own people. But wouldn't that be the easiest way? Much to think about, Lee McCarthy. Sure, I'll go with you. Show me to that. Son of a bee. Sorry, this ain't my decision. I gotta go back to Hollis. Sorry, Taza, we already completed your route, so... The boy seemed disappointed, but I was on a job. I weren't gonna skip out and steal some other man's horse. It ain't right. Then this is where we part. I need to go back with something. Even if you can't give me all the cattle, I'm gonna have to ask you to give me something in exchange. Taza nodded slowly. I think he felt guilty about the whole thing. You do what you need to do to survive, but that don't mean it feels good. He looked around me carefully before he took out a pouch and handed it to me. Inside was... by gum! Gold! Shh. It's all I can give you, but I hope it's enough. We've no use for it. Where'd you get all this? If the town had come to talk to us before, we could have traded for the cattle. Where did you get the gold then, if you have no use for it? I will speak with the chief and try to stop them from taking any more cattle. You want me to tell him you want to trade? No. The chief is more angry than usual with Americans right now. Understandable. I hope you know we ain't all like that. He smiled. And I hope you know we don't all steal cattle. Holding out my hand, he gave it a firm shake. I liked this native. He knew what he was about. Good luck to you. See you on the road. He nodded, and I mounted my horse and set off back to Hollis. Luckily, no arrows came out of nowhere. Goodbye, Taza music. Yes? It didn't take long to get back within sight of Hollis's ranch. He looked surprised to see me back. Well, I never thought I'd see you again, boy. What's vum? I swear. Don't you know what that horse is worth? Sounds like he was trying to set me up or something. I dismounted and handed him the reins. He tied the horse's reins to a fence post, securing her tightly. I'm many things. A gambler, a drinker, a liar, a gunslinger, but I ain't no thief, and I'm proud of it. So, what'd you find out? He offered me a smoke, and I took a long drag. Nothing like the relaxation that came with a cigarette. Especially if, as I suspected from a whiff of his breath and a glance at the bottle behind him, Hollis had been on the whiskey. Why you on the whiskey? And the cigarette? They were the ones taking your cattle. Nah. Expletive natives. I knew it. I'll have Cartwright on them by dusk. Hold it. They're being harassed by Wild Bill, and they don't get no trade from town. They was gonna starve without him. I managed to get something out of them, though. I pulled out the pouch and tossed it to him. Your cows won't go missing no more. He narrowed his eyes, but when he looked in the bag, then he looked in the bag, and they lit up with avarice. This is a lot more than those cows are worth. I know. You say they ain't gonna take no more? No more. I told them they'd have the law on them if they did. And once Wild Bill is put down, they ain't gonna need him anyway. Hollis looked in the pouch again and then back across the desert. Suppose I ain't gonna sick the sheriff on him this time then. Thanks to you, stranger, for sorting the matter for me. I figured he may have forgotten, so I decided to help him out. It's McCarthy, sir. Lee McCarthy. Of course. This time, he held out his hand and I shook it. He had a good, firm grip. Hollis Dalton. I suppose you'll be wanting your pay. Come on in. Let me in! I followed behind him into the ranch proper. It was a nice big place inside. First thing I noticed was a ton of empty bottles all over, just like the one I'd seen on the porch. Looked like Hollis hadn't been dealing with the mayor's death so well. Say, McCarthy. Mr. Dalton? He paused by the table, and for a moment I thought he looked a little sad. You know, everyone thinks it was me that did it. I wouldn't never kill my own brother. But folk around here, they're all blaming me. I had 3 boys quit on me today. He looked at me squarely. I could tell he was under the influence, but I realized just how much he'd had as he made a real effort not to sway where he stood. I wagered he'd probably pass out by evening by the looks. Do you think I did it, McCarthy? I just got here, bro. I remembered asking Jed that same question this morning, and he had the same look in his eyes as I did then. No, sir, I don't. Hollis exhaled. Then I've got one person in this goddamn town who ain't gonna shun me. That's gotta be a start. We don't even live here, man. We just got here. I felt for him. People been thinking that way about me my whole life. Some of this town probably still thought I killed Dalton too. Say, McCarthy? Yes, sir? You fancy working here with me? It'd be nice to have some extra help since I don't have them 3 boys helping around the yard no more. And you look like you've got a strong hand. I know I can trust you. We can help each other figure out what happened to Earl. Then you'll be on your way out of town that much faster. What do you say? I'd like that very much, sir. We're going the Hollis route. The guy was drunk and clearly needed the help. Maybe I'd be able to do some good here. Hollis seemed surprised, but he grinned and held out his hand. Oh, you know what? I should probably save. Save. Empty slot. There we go. Good. Then that's settled. But no more of this sir or Mr. Dalton. I want you to call me Hollis, and I'll call you Lee. This weren't the kind of relationship I was used to having with an employer, but I could already tell Hollis was different. He didn't seem to give a dang what people thought. I suppose when you had the kind of life he did, maybe you just got used to it. In any case, I didn't mind at all. Sounds good to me, Hollis. Thanks. Thanks, Hollis. He nodded and drew out another cigarette. I noticed he was pretty much chain-smoking on top of the alcohol. I wondered if he'd always done it, or if it was a result of the mayor's death. There was a lot I still had to find out about this man. He didn't seem to be about to say nothing else, so I tipped my hat to him. Well, I'll see you bright and early tomorrow then? Sure, I'll come fetch you from the saloon. I got errands in town anyhow. You really don't have to. I can make my own way. I know I don't have to, but I will. No sense you getting here before I get back in any case. Well, alright then. Until tomorrow. See you, Lee. I took my leave of the ranch and headed back towards town. We got a job! Working for Hollis would at least be something I was used to. I'd done quite a bit of ranch work in between journeys on the past. And in the meantime, if he could use his resources to help me investigate the murder without the sheriff getting in the way, the sooner I could get out of here and get to Bill. Bill, 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 Bill. I pushed open the saloon doors and was greeted by Jed, who waved me over to the bar with a grin. Smug looking. Howdy. Care for a drink? Sure, so as long as you're buying. I suppose I can do one on the house, given you're staying here and all. What does that mean? Whiskey or beer? I'll take the whiskey, please. Jed poured out the drink and one for himself as well. He looked like he wanted to say something. I raised an eyebrow, and he went on in an exaggerated tone. So, did you manage to get anything out of Hollis in the end? Well, I learned he weren't the one that done it, that's for sure. Most folk around this place would disagree with you. But between you and me, I don't think Hollis done it neither. And you'd be smarter than most folk. I'm telling you, ain't no way it was him. The man was all roostered up the whole time you were speaking. Looks like he ain't coping well, if I'm honest. Jed paused, looking troubled. Hollis always drinks, but he always drinks alone, you know. I ain't never seen him talking to another soul in here. He was never a popular man like his brother, and Dalton didn't have nothing to do with him until the other day when they tried to talk it out. I always felt bad for him, but he'd never want to talk to me neither. He'd been living in this town his whole life, but to most of them, he's a stranger. Probably why they cast suspicion on him. My eyes traveled around the bar, wondering how many of these people knew a single goddamn thing about the man they labeled a killer. Sounds like he's had a rough time. Yeah. So he don't talk to nobody around here. No friends, and now Dalton's gone, no family. Not anyone except his ranch boys, and they all quit this morning. Came in here straight after saying they didn't want to work for him no more. They've all been there years, so it must have been a real big blow. I thought again about this morning, when he'd seemed a bit sharper. When I returned, he'd been fully drunk. His men had quit on him during the time I was out. Maybe the excessive drinking had been his loneliness. Couldn't be much of a life, just existing on the edge of a town you've always lived in, with nobody to call a friend. Well, as of this afternoon, I'll be doing work around the ranch for him for a while. Jed's eyes almost popped out of his head. For real? Yeah, he didn't seem in a good manner when I was talking to him. I need to stick around here a while anyway, till the sheriff lets me go, and rooms don't pay for themselves. So when he offered me a job, I took him up on it. Thought it seemed like a good deal for both of us. For us both. Lee. People are gonna talk, you know that? Hollis has a reputation, and when with you new in town, taking up with him, just watch yourself, alright? I can handle myself just fine, but thanks for the warning, Jed. Jed nodded, his eyes full of concern. I don't like the rumors that circulate this town, but it ain't fair to tangle a stranger up in all this. With respect, I think I was tangled the moment Cartwright told me to stay put. At least if I'm working with Hollis, us two lone wolves will be out of your way. Let the town get on with its business like before. Jed still looked worried, but I didn't think too much of it. Let folk talk about whatever they liked. I wouldn't be here long anyhow. I finished my drink and grinned. Thanks for the whiskey. I'll head up to my room. Got an early start tomorrow. Sure, I'll wake you up. I'll wake you when I get up then. Much appreciated. Have a good night. Room service? Jed? Jedediah? As I made my way up the stairs, I could feel several pairs of eyes following me. Seems either they didn't like strangers around these parts, or someone seen me coming back from Hollis's. You're very observant, Lee. You're very perceptive, Lee. I still didn't care. Let them think what they wanted about me. Folk like that ain't worth paying no mind to. Pay no mind to folk like that. Ranch. I was woken early the next day by Jed knocking softly on the door. Lee, you up? Hollis is downstairs. Hollis is... what? Says he's here to pick you up. Ooh. I leaned out of bed and checked the clock tower through the open window. It was 5 in the morning. Dang, I'd worked on ranches before, but I never had to get up at this hour for it. I think you're lying, Lee. Get up before the sun rises, bro. Still, I didn't want to raise a muss on my first day on the job, so I dragged myself up and threw on my shirt. New glossary term, raise a muss, to start a fight or commotion. As I went to walk out the room, I noticed a piece of paper on the floor. It looked like a note someone had folded over and put under the door. Wondering if it could be something from Hollis, I picked it up and opened it. Keep your nose out of our town's business, outsider, unless you want it cut off. How had someone gotten a note like this into my room? They slid it under the doorway, sir. Not that I was afraid of it. Of course not. Anyone who had to sneak his threats around this, like this, wasn't worth worrying about. But if someone broke into the saloon, then Jed ought to know about it. Lee, shall I tell him to wait? Dang. I'd forgotten he was still outside the door. Nah, I'm coming. Let him know now, bro. He just walks in our room. I opened the door, crumpling the paper in my hand, and saw the disheveled barkeep rubbing his eyes. Ain't often someone's up earlier than I am. Good luck with that one, McCarthy. Oh, it ain't so bad. Hey, look, Jed, I gotta ask. Before I could finish what I was saying, I heard a shout from down below. I ain't got all day, you know. On my way, Hollis. Bring your plunder down with you, would ya? I exchanged a confused glance with Jed, but then turned back into my room to fetch my things. Although I had no idea why Hollis wanted to see it, it wouldn't be professional to ignore a request from my employer. Especially on my first day. I grabbed everything right quick and hurried downstairs, throwing the note in my bag and thinking no more on it. Bye, Jed. Hollis was waiting in the bar, looking irritable. He was already puffing on a cigarette, though he didn't smell of alcohol this morning. About time. Now, pay up your stay to Jed and let's get going. And pardon me? Hollis took a long drag. You're moving into the ranch with me while you're in my employ. That knocked me galley west! He hadn't never mentioned that before. I appreciated the offer of free lodging, but did it seem a little much to be living in his house all of a sudden? You didn't mention that yesterday, Hollis. Yeah, well, I thought about it. I got the room, and it's expensive for you to keep staying here. Wouldn't want all your wages to go on diggings. So settle up with Jed and let's get going. Hollis, you're so kind. Jed was watching the conversation with wide eyes, not saying a word. Sure, let me just settle up the bill then. Isn't this all a bit unusual? I'd prefer to stay at the saloon if it's all the same. I don't know if this will affect anything. No, we got it. Good end versus bad end. Sure, let me just settle up the bill then. I turned to him and shrugged. Seems I'll be checking out. Sure, come over to the bar and I'll sort out what you owe. I followed Jed, leaving Hollis tapping his foot by the door. As soon as we were out of earshot, I spoke in a low voice. Is this normal? Not for Hollis, it ain't. He hasn't let another soul stay in the house for years. Seems he must have taken a real liking to you. Felt hot all over and glanced at Hollis out of the corner of my eye. Okay. I knew Jed probably didn't mean it like I thought he meant it, but it'd been a while since I'd gone Perutan. It was natural to react this way. Hollis was an objectively attractive man after all. Is he? Forcing myself to keep my voice straight, I swallowed. Ugh. Well, what do you know? Jed shrugged with a tired smile. Works for you though, right? He knows. He knows. Free lodging at the place you're already working. Oh, that's what you meant. Yeah, it's great. I settled up my bill with Jed, which cost almost the last of what I had left, then tipped my hat. Thanks for everything, Jed. My pleasure. I'll see you. That's a look of concern on his face. Yeah, see you. That's a look that says, I'll never see you ever again. I turned and made my way over to Hollis, who waved to Jed, then abruptly whirled around and walked out the doors. Tee-hee! Tee-hee! We're like a puppy. Hee-hee-hee-hee. He didn't say a word to me, and I had to hurry to catch up. I wasn't sure where I stood with him, or what kind of mood swings he was having, but I resolved to do my best to be professional. That way, at least he couldn't have no complaints. Yeah. Totally. We walked across the main town square and stopped in front of the sheriff's station. Hollis cleared his throat and gestured at it. This is the town jail and the sheriff's office. Then he pointed to a building next to it. That there's the funeral parlor, and beyond it is the town hall with the clock tower. Behind that is the blacksmith and the general store. He turned and indicated over to the side. That way, at the far end of the street, is Miss Bell's boarding house. Then working inwards, you have the grocer, the bank, and the tanners. Keeping up so far? He raised an eyebrow at me, and I saw what he was trying to do. He'd got up early to make sure he had the time to show me around, give me a tour, and make sure I knew where everything was. I felt a smile creeping into the corner of my mouth. We're about to be this dude's errand boy. Sure. Good. Now, over that way. He spent the next half hour showing me down side streets and pointing out various places of interest. He claimed it was so he could send me out on errands in the future alone. I'm sure I could have found my way to most of these places by myself, though. I think he just wanted an excuse to get up and about and not be alone with his thoughts. Well, that was just fine with me. Hollis was a good guide, what with him knowing dang near everything about this town, so after a while, I was fully caught up. Alright then, that should be everything you'll need. Oh, and Slim's place is just over to the west, about 5 minutes from here. He cleared his throat. It's a what? I don't personally use it, but I won't restrict you going there if you want, so as long as you ain't skipping work to do it. I felt myself going a little red. I don't need to frequent those establishments. You don't have nothing to worry about on that account. It seemed to me that Hollis almost let out a relieved breath. Probably because he was pleased his employee wouldn't be causing no scandals or bringing unsavory women back to the ranch. Hollis glanced up at the clock tower and then back at me. Right, now the town tour's over. Places should be starting to open up. Come and help me finish my errands, and then we'll head on back to the ranch to get you set up there. Got it, boss. First off, we stopped at the bank, and Hollis picked up a bunch of papers concerning Dalton's accounts. Seems he'd been left everything as next of kin since Dalton didn't make a will, so he had a lot to organize. Then we went to the attorneys to get the documents ratified, where I felt mighty out of place in my traveling clothes and dusty boots. We hurried out of there as soon as we could, Hollis looking a little embarrassed. Our next stop was the town hall. What, was he embarrassed of me? Hollis had been helping to fix up the roof a couple months back, he explained, and had left a ladder there, so I hefted it on my shoulders. It was pretty weighty, and I found myself shifting it uncomfortably over my back. Luckily, the last stop was on the way out of town, the blacksmith's. Hollis had put in an order of horseshoes that had just been finished. Of course, he gave me the dang things to carry. Why didn't you bring a dang horse? You saying you can't handle a little heavy lifting? Dude, he's watching us. I grunted with the effort of holding the iron horseshoes in one hand and gripping the ladder with the other. Not at all. But why aren't you taking some of the load at least? I got back problems. Old man. Can't lift too much or do any strenuous activity, or the doc says it'll go bust. Then you'd have to deal with an invalid, and you don't want that now, do you? Hollis smirked at me and led the way on out towards the ranch. I was pretty sure he was hazing me somehow. After the nice gesture he made to come show me around town, he had to balance it out, or I'd be thinking he was soft. Or he's just watching Lee doing heavy lifting, being sweaty. It took about an eternity, but we finally arrived at the ranch, and I threw down the ladder and horseshoes outside the stable. Good work, Lee. I was puffing and panting, and I was sure I didn't look good. Strange that this was my first concern in front of a Hollis. Probably because it's hard not to compare yourself when you're in the presence of someone so attractive. I'm sorry, sir, but your sprite art is really not giving that impression. Hey, you're a million miles away. Now come on in and I'll show you to your room. Oh, sure, thanks. I guess that's just what Lee's into, huh? The ranch was just as large and imposing as it seemed the other day. I really weren't comfortable in fancy places or large houses. Felt like there was just too much space, and everything was worth more than it should be. Didn't like the thought that I could knock some over that cost my month's paycheck. Still, it was kind of Hollis to let me stay, especially if his having people here was as rare as Jed made it sound, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful. So I tried my hardest to hide my discomfort and eased my way into the hallway, careful not to touch nothing. You will be staying over here. Hollis motioned to a room over to the right of the parlor. It was small and cozy, much more like the kind of place I preferred. Some simple furnishings and decor, not much I could accidentally ruin, though they were still real fancy. I reckoned my stay would be fine, just fine so long as I could spend the majority of my free time in this room. It's great. Thank you again very much. Hollis waved a hand. Ain't nothing. It'll be easier to have you here in the mornings. Means we can wake up and just get on with it. Besides, it would have been expensive for you to stay at Jed's. I don't expect this case to be solved quickly, so it's best you ain't living off your own dime till then. Please, take some rent out of my pay. I'd feel awful bad living here for nothing. Nah. Humor me and let an old man do someone a favor for once. You should have said, I was already doing that. You did not need to say that. I was already going to steal your money. Not steal your money. Take your money out of the paycheck. I knew it. There was something in his eyes. A glimmer that made me feel like he weren't telling the whole truth. Still, his motives didn't seem to be malicious. More like than not, he was just lonely and didn't want to own to it. Couldn't say I blamed him. We were pretty much strangers to each other after all. McCarthy's lonely too, though, so that's perfect. Alright then. Get your stuff sorted out, and I'll see you out front in 5 to shoe them horses. Hollis left, and I turned to my bag and pulled out what meager possessions I carried. Halfway through, I came across a crumpled note from earlier and suddenly remembered I'd forgot to tell Jed about it. Maybe Hollis would know something. It was a long shot, but perhaps from the script he could decipher who wrote it. Hey, Hollis? I heard his voice issuing from the kitchen, along with the distinctive sound of liquid being poured into a glass. That hadn't taken him long. It was barely 9. Yeah, something wrong? Nah, just found this and remembered I should have mentioned something to Jed earlier on. Mind if I pick your brain on it? Sure, what is it? He appeared in the doorway of the room, leaning on the frame with his glass in hand. Yep, whiskey, just like I'd figured. This man definitely had a problem. I averted my eyes from the alcohol and held up the paper in my hand. This was slipped under my door during the night. You got any idea who could have wrote it? Hollis took the paper from my hand and scanned over it, frowning. Bleep! Sounds like someone really don't want you poking around here. Must mean they're scared if they're sending you something like this. I got no idea who wrote it though. They've tried hard to disguise their writing. You say you didn't tell Jed about this? Nah, I meant to, but I forgot. Hollis nodded slowly, then handed me back the note. Keep it under wraps for now, and let's hope you don't get no more of them now you're here. You're not thinking of running, are you? Never. It'd take a lot more than that to frighten me off. Good. He tilted his head back and finished his drink with a gulp. Then he dragged his sleeve across his mouth and fixed me with an appraising stare. You ready to meet the horses then? Yes! I put away the note and followed Hollis out of the room, keen to get to work and keep my mind busy. Gee, Hollis, I can't believe this room layout is the exact same as the room in Jed's. What followed was a long day of hard work. All 3 of Hollis's men quit, so between the 2 of us, we were doing the job of all of them. After shoeing the horses, we had to check and count the cattle, fix the fences at the perimeter, feed the dogs. The list went on, and by dusk, I was dragged out. It had been a long time since I'd done this kind of work. I stood up, cracking my back, then looked over from where I'd been mending a chicken coop to the ranch, where the lights were starting to flicker into life. Hollis had gone in around mid-afternoon to start working on the documents he'd had to sort for his brother's estate. There weren't much point working out here after dark anyways, so I figured I'd finish up quick and go in to see if I could help. As I went in, I could hear the sound of music playing in the main parlor. I didn't recognize it, but it was the kind of soft piano score that melted into the background and made you feel all relaxed. I'd always loved piano music. Lee McCarthy lore! If I'd have had the chance to learn, I think I would have liked to know how to play. Of course, being a farm boy, chances of getting my hands on a piano as a kid were slim to none. And now, well, now I've got other things to do. Too busy traveling all over to think about that kind of stuff. Maybe one day, I'd be able to learn. Maybe one day. I went into my room and changed out of my sweaty shirt, pulling on a spare one I had in the bottom of my bag. Then I went to find Hollis. Transitions after transitions. He was sitting in a chair in the parlor, drink in hand and smoke glowing. There wasn't no sign of the documents anywhere. Lee, everything good out there? He held out a hand, indicating the chair beside him. Good out where? I sat down at his invitation and ran my hand through my hair. Yeah, all the fencing checked out, so I went and tightened up some of the coops. Ah, good. You smoke, Lee? Only on occasion. Not easy to get hold of cigarettes on the road. Here, this one's on me. He passed me a cigarette, and I lit up from the nearby candle on the table. I took a long drag, feeling the smoke start to relax me straight away. Being a bounty hunter and living out of town, I didn't often have the chance to smoke, but one every now and again really made a difference. Hollis watched on approvingly. Thanks. It ain't nothing. We sat in silence for a little while, listened to the music. It weren't uncomfortable at all, rather, it felt like we were old friends. It was odd. By all accounts, I should have nothing in common with a rich ranch owner like Hollis, but here we were, getting along great. Perhaps because both of us knew what it was like to be lonely. How did you get on with sorting your brother's accounts? Hollis sighed, and suddenly he looked 10 years older. Not far. It's still hard to look at him, you know. Earl was always just there, and though we didn't talk, I always thought one day we would. And now we won't. Never again. His eyes went red, and he swallowed audibly. It's just hard, you know. I know. I leaned across towards him and put a hand on his arm as he shakily took another drink. Whoa! I lost someone 8 years ago, and it don't get any easier. Thinking about what you should have said or might have done. At the end of the day, all we can do is keep moving forward and do what you can for him now. Brooding on the past don't make anything better, but working on the future just might. Who, if you don't mind? Was it your brother? Father? I chuckled without any humor in it. How could I even start to explain what Jimmy was to me? Jimmy! I forgot about Jimmy! Well, I forgot his name was Jimmy. He was my best friend, my partner in everything. Jimmy is the reason I do anything. He made me the man I am. A young guy like you? Yeah, we were almost the same age. Howdy... Shot. Dang, I'm sorry, Lee. Yeah, me too. Talking about Jimmy was making my throat close up. It was always hard, but especially now for some reason. Hollis covered his face with his palm. Dang, Lee, I didn't mean to... You didn't. It's no odds, Hollis. I just wanted to say I understand what it's like. I'm sorry you never got the chance to make up with him. Hollis nodded and drained his drink. Yeah. I'm getting another one. You want one? Yeah, please. Rocks? Neat. Neat! Thanks. Hollis got about pouring us drinks, and I had a moment to stop and steady myself. I couldn't remember the last time I talked about Jimmy to anyone like that. Normally, I'd talk to him alone, in private, wherever he was, and keep it all to myself like a closely guarded secret. I had wanted to reach out to Hollis and help him, make him feel like he weren't quite so alone in all this. But I hadn't thought about it before speaking, and now my chest hurt like it hadn't in a long time. Just gotta cry it out, bro. Hollis handed me my drink, and I took a sip. It was beautifully smooth. This music, I like it a lot. That made Hollis sit up a little. Yeah? You into music? Not so much. Didn't have much of a chance to be, really. But I always thought the piano sounded nice. Hollis grinned at me and gestured behind him toward his rooms. You know, I got one here. If you wanted to try it out. I wouldn't even know where to start. Never laid a finger on one. It's easy to get the basics. I'll help you. Looking into his animated face, which just a few minutes past had been full of grief and regret, I couldn't say no. Sure, that'd be nice. Piano? Smiling widely, Hollis stood up and finished his glass. Well, come on then. Right now? No time like the present. Well, I've had a bit to drink. He rolled his eyes and folded his arms. Look, Lee, there's always a reason not to start. You've spent, what, 25 years not learning to play? I sighed and swirled the whiskey in my glass. 28. Even more of a reason to start right now, then. Come on, it won't kill you. He seemed so earnest, and I didn't want to be the reason he sunk back into thinking about Dalton. Besides, what harm could it do? I had always thought about it. Maybe it'd be fun to try. Shrugging, I gulped down the rest of my drink and stood up. Alright then, let's go. Hollis grinned and clapped me on the shoulder, grabbing another bottle from the cabinet. Right this way then. Hollis is a man of the arts? I followed him into the back room, connected to the parlor. How'd you come to own this place? Drunk piano lesson date? Flushed? My exact thoughts, Jirachi. Welcome, welcome. We're about to see where this leads. It's been in the family for years. Decided to take over and run it when my pa kicked the bucket. It needed some doing up, but I've been working on it for a while, and it's almost finished now. You've done a great job. I meant it. The ranch looked real fancy. Are we romancing Hollis this evening? I only remember Taza TBH. Yes, this evening we are going after Hollis, Mr. Ranch owner. And yeah, Taza's legendary, his smiling face and the little emoticon that you put in chat whenever he pops up, it's like seared into my mind. I love it so much. He's just there smiling. Piano music. Piano lesson. Beyond it was a large open room, sparsely decorated with big windows looking out over the desert. There was a square grand piano, real shiny and smooth. It must have been a great make. I caught my breath just looking at it. This was my ma's. She used to love to play songs for us all evening. I think that's where Earl and I got our love of music from. That's sweet. I ran my hair carefully over the glossy wood, noting a layer of dust on the keys. You're telling me you didn't cover the thing with the thing? You didn't cover the keys with a thing? I guess maybe they didn't have a key cover thing? I totally know what the parts of a piano. Yeah. Sounds like you were all a real happy family growing up. Hollis's face softened as he poured us both another glass of whiskey. He brought mine over and handed it to me, and his fingers were real soft as they brushed against mine. Okay. I was certain now it weren't by accident. Okay! Yeah, we had it pretty good. It all started to go wrong after our parents died, of course. But up till then, well, I miss those times. Yeah, flourished. The lights on. Turn the lights on. He sat down at the stool and brushed his fingers lightly over the piano keys. I couldn't help but notice and admire his deft of movements. Had to stop that train of thought before he got too far along the tracks. Yeah, McCarthy, rein it in. So, you ever touched one of these before? The piano, Lee. Why would you word it like that? Right, no, I never had the chance. The piano, Lee, focus! Well, I ain't the best teacher, but I reckon I can recall enough to show you the basics. Come sit. He shifted half off the stool, gesturing for me to sit by him. I gingerly sat down, trying to leave some small space between us, though there weren't much room to begin with. Ruh-roh. Hollis didn't seem to notice my discomfort, as he was so lost in the piano itself. Oh! Dude, Hollis looks like a different man in this CG. He does look handsome here. McCarthy looks good here too. Alright, so music's made up of 12 different notes, which, when you play them in the right order, make up a song. There's loads of ways to change the pitch of the notes as well, which is what all these different keys are for. So first thing is to learn which note is which. Then when I tell you to play one, you'll know what key to hit. Give him a try and get a feel for it. Hold on, why does McCarthy here kind of remind me? He kind of looks like Eren Yeager from Shingeki. Hollis was a good teacher. Older Eren? We sat there for what felt like hours as he showed me each and every key on the piano and what it sounded like. I didn't have the best memory for stuff like this, so I knew I'd probably forget most of it real quick. But it was nice just to sit there and feel like I was learning something. I couldn't play no songs, but I played a chord or two by the end. The old piano made a beautiful, rich sound. Say, Hollis, do you know any songs on this thing? One or two. Why? Do you want me to play one? Yes! Yeah, it sounds better on this than on the phonograph. I've had a lot to drink, so it may not sound as good as you think. It was true. He'd been through most of the bottle. Whoa! And was almost sweating on the stool by now. Still, I found I really wanted to hear him play. Yeah, I'd really like it. Well, sure then. Let's see. He began to play, and the room was filled with the sound of soft music. I could tell he was rusty, hitting notes wrong and out of time, but I was very impressed. It'd probably be years before I could play anything that good from memory, if I even got the chance to keep on practicing. This was one of Earl's favorites. I learned it from Ma to play to him the day he came back from law school. Law school? Hollis's eyes were misting over as he fell back into his memories. I watched his fingers gliding over the keys and didn't interrupt. Earl was 10 years my senior, so we never really had what you'd call a proper childhood together. More like he was my idol, everything I ever wanted to be. My big brother Earl, smart and brave. Boy, if I could just grow up and be anything like him, I'd have it made, I thought. He was always so supportive as well, you know. Brothers. He'd bring me stuff back from his trips away when he was in his 20s, and he'd always have the most fascinating stories. I still can't believe he ain't here no more. That one day he ain't gonna come busting in that door telling me all about his latest adventure. Well, you guys were not on speaking terms for X amount of years. I saw the ghost of a tear sliding down Hollis' cheek. Unwilling to let on I'd noticed, instead I put a hand on his shoulder and tried to think of what best to say. Okay, a shame that you two were driven so far apart. Seems like you had a lot you still needed to say to him. Yeah, save. Seems like you had a lot you still needed to say to him. Hollis took a long, slow breath. Yeah, plenty. You know, sometimes it helps to let it out. He's listening somewhere, I'm sure. Tonight, in your room, try talking to him. I do this with my dead friend Jimmy. You think wherever he is, he's wasting his time listening to me? Yeah, I think he is. You're his little brother, after all. Hollis stopped playing the music and put his head in his hands, not even trying to hide his sobs this time. No! I felt awkwardly close to him on the stool, especially now the music had stopped. Still, I'd had some amount to drink, which was making my head buzz, and I didn't feel like I could leave him in this state. Dude, brothers are my weakness. Carefully, I lifted my hand from his shoulder and placed my whole arm over the back of his neck, gripping his far shoulder instead. What the heck? How much taller is he from McCarthy? He leaned into me, shaking, and we sat there for a long while. Not the big older man crying in our arms because of his dead brother, that he has so many things that he wasn't able to say to him that they were able to reconcile before he died. No! No. I didn't want to interrupt his thoughts, and I didn't know how he felt about breaking down like this in front of someone he barely knew. An employee, no less. With all the harsh words he'd had for me so far, and his brusque way of running his place, I'd felt like he was much more of a standoffish man than this. But then again, I realized that, like many other people in this town, I didn't know Hollis as well as I'd surmised. Despite everything, it felt right being there, knowing I was helping in some small way. Lord knows I would have appreciated someone doing the same for me when Jimmy died. I'd been a wreck. In some ways, 8 years later, I still was. Hollis gradually stopped crying and cleared his throat, straightening up and not looking me in the eye. This is a different man. I apologize. I shouldn't have put you in that kind of position. Hey, it's no odds. You just lost your brother. There ain't no rules to follow in this situation. Hollis collapsed back into himself, his shoulders sagging, and shook his head slowly. It's not even just that. It's everything, you know. Earl being gone, me dealing with the estate, but all the eyes on the back of my head when I go into town. That's the worst. I know they all hate me. They all think I done it. None of them know. None of them remember what it was like. What I was like. Before the split with Earl, before I moved out to the edge of town and became this. He gestured down at himself with genuine disappointment in his voice. Hey now, I'm sure not all of them. They think the worst of me because Earl was a popular one. After he was elected mayor, they didn't care to know me, didn't want to be seen taking my side. Did Earl perpetuate that? Nah, at least not on purpose. It was enough just being him. People were like moths to a flame. Just like I had been when I was younger, before it all happened. I had to admit, I was very curious about what had gone on between Hollis and Earl. It felt like there was some big missing piece of information here that would have made the picture clear to me. Because right now, I was failing to see how two brothers as close as they'd been could have become so distant. To the point where townsfolk who've known Hollis since he was born would shun him to curry Earl's favor, misguided as they might have been. I was about to open my mouth and ask when Hollis cut me off. Let's have another glass, eh, Lee? Bro, you just had a whole bottle. I could use one. You could use some sleep. He snapped shut the piano lid and shifted off the stool, stumbling a little as he went. I was a little concerned that maybe we'd had enough to drink. I think I'll stop here. You quitting on me now? I don't think I can have another and still be rising early to milk the cows in the morning. Well, suit yourself. I'm gonna have a nightcap. He shakily poured out the last of the bottle, tipping it up to make sure the last strips fell into his glass. To family. Before I could stop him, he tipped his head back and was gulping down the whole thing. God dang, was his head gonna hurt in the morning. He slammed down the glass with a satisfied grin. That hits the spot. I was getting a little worried, having seen his alcohol consumption from early this morning till now. If he drank this much every day, he wasn't doing well, that was for sure. Come on then, Lee, let's turn in. He stepped forward and immediately staggered. I moved quickly to grab his shoulder and stop him falling over. Whoa, steady there. I'll help you, come on. I eased his arm over my shoulders and let him lean on me, then guided him carefully out of the piano room and into the hallway. Lord, if I was concerned about knocking stuff over before, that'd gone out the window. It was enough trouble to keep Hollis upright, let alone on a steady course. I could have sworn he weren't this drunk when we were speaking. Maybe that last glass had tipped him over the edge. Watch that. Don't worry. I hated that sconce anyways. This here's my door, Lee. I kicked it open and gently pushed Hollis through the doorway. The room inside was real dark, so I couldn't see much beyond what the hallway lit up. I could make out the shape of the ornate bed, though, so I made our way towards that and let Hollis fall into it. That's better. Still missing one thing, though. I cocked my head in confusion, but before I could register what he'd meant, he sat up and grabbed my face in his hands. Then he was kissing me. Oh, he needed his goodnight kiss. My mind went into shock. McCarthy shook. I could taste the whiskey and smoke on his lips like a fine mix of masculinity, and it made parts of me ache. His strong hand fondled my hair, and I found myself wanting him badly. But this was all wrong. He was very drunk and likely didn't rightly know what he was doing. As much as I was attracted to him, I couldn't let it carry on. I pulled away all hasty and stepped back from the bedside. Leaving so soon? Come on, Lee. What, don't you want to stay? His smile and raised eyebrow left me under no illusions of what he wanted me to do. Dang. But the strain in my pants was messing with my brain. Regardless, though, this would be wrong. This is our first day on the job. Look, Hollis, I'm flattered. But you're soaked off your mind right now, and I ain't gonna get into bed with a man who don't rightly know what he's doing. I'm sorry, but I've gotta go. I gotta get out of here. I didn't wait to see his face or hear his reply, instead bolted out the door and shutting it behind me. Phew! That had been unexpected, to say the least. I'd had a feeling he was that way inclined, and that he maybe had an eye for me, based on his proximity earlier tonight. But I didn't ever expect him to be so bold about it. Then again, this was Hollis I was dealing with. I had to learn to expect him not to act like anyone else would, or should. Slowly, I made my way back to my room. Lock the door, mister. Man's drunk. When I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling a little while later, it occurred to me that at no point during that interaction had I felt guilty. Normally, when I was doing anything remotely sexual, I'd still be feeling a seed of shame in my heart over Jimmy. But this time, I'd been focused entirely on Hollis. I think because he's drunk and you're trying to take care of him. Maybe it was because it hadn't gone any further than a kiss. Remembering it, the forcefulness of his lips, the taste and smell of him, made my pants start to tighten up again. Bro needs to get new pants. I rolled over and put it out of my mind. Those are thoughts for another day. Gotta wake up bright and early for work. How not awkward will it be? Next morning, I was up bright and early. My head was somewhat groggy from last night's drinks and events, but it was nothing some hard labor couldn't fix. I went out to take care of the morning chores, milking, feeding the horses, and checking on the dogs. Yup, we're sure doing some ranch work. I figured Hollis wouldn't be about for a couple hours, but I didn't know what to say to him, even if he was. Last night had turned into some awkward debacle in my head, but that I wasn't sure how to get past. Would he be angry with me for rejecting him? Would he? Or won't he? Did I even do the right thing? Turns out, though, I needn't have worried. After I'd finished outside for the day, I came in and saw Hollis sitting at his desk in the parlor, flickering through the documents. Howdy, Lee. Everything alright out there? His smile was jovial and his manner upbeat. Surprisingly, there was no alcohol to be seen. I rubbed the back of my neck. Sure. Those the accounts? Sure are. Figured I'd make a start on them with a fresh head after the talk we had last night. Thanks for that, by the way. Sure, no problem. He didn't mention what happened after. Maybe he'd forgot? Hey, look. Here it was. That softened tone and the look in his eyes. I knew he was about to say something about it. There's nobody in this town I trust but you and me. That includes Sheriff Cartwright. Cartwright? Oh, the case. My mind snapped back to it. The sheriff and my brothers were very good friends, and they liked to team up against me when it came to dealing with the natives. I don't think the sheriff has reason to have done it, but I do feel that Cartwright might hold a grudge against me, especially since I'm inheriting, and might not be telling me everything there is to know. So while I'm looking through these, do you think you could head out to my brother's old house and have a look around? Sure thing. It'd be good to get my mind back onto the real issue here, figuring out who killed Dalton. Felt like it'd been a while since I'd really been properly focused. Anything in particular you think I should be looking for? Hollis shrugged. Stuff that looks out of place, or anything that points to someone being there who shouldn't have been. And be careful. If Cartwright catches you sniffing around there, he might try to hide evidence from you. Don't let him intimidate you. Sheriff didn't get to me the other day, and he ain't gonna get to me now either. I got his number. Don't worry about that. Good on you, Lee. Best of luck. I took my leave and let Hollis get back to leafing through the papers. I need water. Whew. Good old H2O. Now I had something concrete to do in relation to finding the killer. I was feeling a lot better, more driven. That son of a gun was going down, and Hollis would walk out free and clear. And, of course, I get to leave town to get Wild Bill. That was the whole point, wasn't it? I headed out, determined to get to the bottom of it. Ooh, new building. We were looking at a fence. We were looking at a wall. And now, the fence again. It weren't a long trip to Dalton's estate. The house was situated on the southern edge of town, surrounded by acres of land. Almost as soon as I arrived at the iron gates, I realized my problem. I didn't have no key, and the giant padlock staring back at me was putting a short stop to my investigation. Frustrated with myself for not thinking to ask whether Hollis had one, I paced back and forth. The iron fence was too high to climb over. I decided to walk around the perimeter of the fence and see if I couldn't peek inside. There might still be something useful to be found. No point in wasting a trip. Excuse me. At the back of the house, I found something that didn't look right. The grass was all scuffed about like something heavy landed on it. I squinted up against the sun and saw there was an open window fairly high up. No way a man could have gotten up there alone. Sure enough, the patch of grass was right below it. I strained to see more. Then my eyes passed over a scrap of cloth caught on the bottom of the still. It was straight dark brown, looking like it had been ripped off of something. Maybe from someone's clothes as they tried to jump out the window getting away. If so, then there must have been at least 2 people here that night, cause ain't no way someone brought a ladder with them. That piece of information would be good news for Hollis for 2 reasons. He was a well-known loner, so going to all the trouble of finding an accomplice was unlikely. And he told me he had back problems yesterday morning. If that was true, no way he could climb on another man's shoulders or support someone standing on his. But all that postulating hinged on this being the entry point. If only I could get inside the railings and have a proper look. Sadly, it didn't seem like that was going to happen anytime soon, so I turned away and started to head out, mind buzzing. Something caught my eye though as I walked away, and I did a double take. Sure enough, a boot print. I was surprised to see it still there after it had been a few days, especially since I'd have assumed the killers would have cleaned up after themselves on the way out. It was probably just left by some random passerby, nothing to do with the murder. Still, even if it wasn't connected, I had nothing else to go on, so I figured I may as well check it out. The print was large, definitely a man's. It weren't clear enough to make out the pattern on the sole. I looked ahead and couldn't see another print following up, but I could see open desert in the direction its owner had been heading. Perhaps there'd be more clues out there. Well, it was a darn sight better than going back to the ranch and sitting on my arse, that was for sure. That's for sure. I walked out past the last of the trees bordering the mayor's estate and out towards the open desert. There weren't a soul out here except me. I remembered from the map I'd looked at before coming out here that down this way, south of town, there was nothing but miles upon miles of desert. Perfect place for bandits to camp out, like Bill for instance. Could he have been involved in this? It seemed unlikely. Bill chose his targets carefully, and Dalton didn't seem like his usual fare. But who knew? Could have been he got paid enough to put aside his principles, or he had some other reason. Bandits were bandits through and through at the end of the day. Howdy, who goes there? Show yourself, stranger, I'm armed. Not the sheriff. I stopped walking, startled, and spotted a rocky outcrop in the direction the voice had come from. Seemed I'd been so caught up in my musings that I'd failed to notice the sheriff's presence in the area. What was he doing all the way out here, I wonder? It's Lee McCarthy, sir. I stepped towards the rock and held my hands up, showing I didn't want no trouble. This could be bad. I'd hoped I wouldn't have to deal with Cartwright today. The man himself stepped out from behind the outcrop and leaned against it, folding his arms. Well, McCarthy. What might you be doing all the way out here? Trying to skip town? I should warn you, there ain't nothing but open desert that way. I ain't going nowhere. Didn't Hollis tell you I'm working for him now? Oh, and if that's the case, why are you out here so far from the ranch? Hollis sent me out on an errand, that's all. Thought on the way back I'd come past the old mayor's house. It's a free country. Ain't nobody said I can't be here. The sheriff pushed himself off the rock and walked up to me slowly. You're acting like you got something to hide, McCarthy. He was real close, his narrowed eyes piercing straight through me, and the smell of his cologne strong in the air. Don't forget, you're a stranger to this town. Go throwing your weight around, and you might get caught up without that term. In a predicament or tricky situation may be seen standalone as up the creek. Now, I'm going to escort you back to town, and you're going to come with me, quietly. And I don't want to catch you sniffing around here, or anywhere you ain't supposed to be again. Have I made myself clear? I narrowed my eyes at him. There was no question this guy was suspicious. Hanging around out here all alone just because he had a shiny badge didn't mean he couldn't be culpable. Of course, I didn't dare say it to his face. would have been all he needed to throw me in the dump, most likely. A term for a prison. Note that Lee uses it to describe a jail cell, which is vastly different from the dedicated prisons where criminals were incarcerated. Thanks, glossary. Instead, I kept my mouth shut, intending to say it all to Hollis later on. Fine. Lead the way, Sheriff. Cartwright gave me one last glare, then turned on his heel, spurs clicking, and walked back towards town. I was forced to follow, teeth gritted, staring into his back. Between Bill and this guy, I wasn't sure who was more likely to have done it. Who done it? It hadn't been a wasted trip, though. I knew it hadn't been a one-man job, and I knew that probably Hollis was innocent. Provably. That was enough for a start. You killed your own brother! Before long, we were back and in the center of town. Cartwright stopped to give me another stern look. Get yourself back to the ranch, or wherever you're going. And let me handle this investigation. It's my job. Right you are, Sheriff. I'll be on my way. I couldn't put much more derision into my tone than that without kicking up a fuss. Turning on my heel, I headed back to Hollis's. Bet. How much you want to bet? He's drunk out of his mind again. It didn't take long to get there, and when I did, I found Hollis in the stable with the horses. He was sitting down in the stall of one of his favorites, Betty, a brown mare, while she chewed on an apple. I stopped for a minute at the door and watched him with her, petting her nose. Between this, his piano playing, and his sad soul, there was so much more to this man that the outside world just didn't see. I was hoping to be able to fix at least a little part of that, get him to see that Hollis weren't no murderer. Howdy. He started a little when I spoke, then grinned in his lopsided way. Lee, how'd it go? You find anything? Yes and no. Want to go inside and get a drink? Stop enabling him. You betcha. Patting the mare's neck one last time, he got up, stubbed out his cigarette, and gestured for me to lead the way. Back at it again. We went indoors, and before long, we were sitting in the armchairs in the parlor with fresh glasses of whiskey. Well, when I got there, I couldn't get past the fence. Hollis's face fell, and he smacked his forehead. Ha! Shoot, I forgot they'd have locked up the gate. Arrow used to always have it open during the day. I didn't even think about it. So you didn't get anything then? Once I figured out I couldn't get inside, I decided to walk around. And I think I saw something fishy. At the back of the house, there's a high window. Yeah, it's the back bedroom. Well, looks like that was where the break-in went on. There was a scrap of cloth, looked like clothing, and a flat patch of grass beneath the window like someone had been standing under it. Hollis's eyes were wide as saucers. Ain't no way a man could climb up there all alone. Unless he brought a ladder with him, which seems unlikely. Exactly. This was easily a two-man job, maybe more. Moreover, if this is true, we can prove it wasn't you. How so? You got back problems, don't you? No way you could have climbed up there. Well, yeah, but ain't nobody really knows that except me and you. Besides, it doesn't prove that just because I'm not the one that actually done it, I didn't pay for it. Folk around here will need empirical proof, another culprit, before they'll change their minds. I looked down into my glass. Well, dang. I really thought I might have cracked that. That's why you're a bounty hunter, Lee, and not a detective. Hollis waved a hand and smiled gently. Ain't no odds. I've been a loner a long time. I don't pay no mind to what they think of me. I would have believed him too, if his smile had reached his eyes. To take his mind off it, I cleared my throat and went on. Well, that weren't the only thing. Oh yeah? He sat forward, interested, and the haunted look left his eyes. I found a boot print headed out into the desert and thought I'd take a look out there. Thought maybe Bill or one of his thugs had been involved. That I could try to see if there was a trail. Ran into Cartwright though and got stopped short. What was Cartwright doing on the way out there? He told me that all the evidence there was at the house had already been found. Yeah, well, seems that ain't true, or he wouldn't have been so defensive. He snapped at me, told me to remember I was a stranger here and not to go throwing my weight around or poking my nose where it didn't belong. Then he escorted me back to town and made sure I headed back to the ranch. Hollis sat back, swishing his drink and frowning. Cartwright and Earl were good friends. I hadn't never really considered he could have done it. Why would he? They'd always been a great team, always been united against me when it came to their Native Americans and their land. What's your problem with the Native Americans? I'm curious. Before the cattle, I mean. Hollis snorted. I ain't got no problem with them per se. I just feel like our people should come first, you know? This ranch provides meat, milk, and leather for most of the town, but the demand keeps rising, and I can't make no more than I already am. They all say I just want profits, but it ain't about that. Sooner or later, folks are going to go hungry, and there's no solution. Except expanding the size of the ranch. Well, the only good land around here is in Native American territory, and though Earl had the power to take it off him, he wouldn't. We fought about it a lot, but he wouldn't budge. Different viewpoints, I guess. He says that if we took the land off them, then they'd go hungry, and how's that any better? Not to mention that they could take their complaints to the feds and have it undone anyway. But then at least we'd have some attention from him. Someone to come down here and help us fix the problem we got. Hollis got all animated during his speech, his arms waving about. I could see it was something he really believed in. I wasn't sure what to feel either way. Population was a growing problem everywhere, but the Native Americans were here first, so it weren't right that we even took more away from them. It's a difficult subject to be sure. Well, anyways, that was all the contact that Earl and I ever had over the last 10 years. Arguing about politics with Cartwright looking on. He sighed and dropped his head. I can't believe the sheriff could do something like this. I don't know what his motive might be. But the way you described him today, and the way he's been about this whole thing, I thought it was just because Earl was his friend, and he wanted to feel like he was doing something right by him, personally investigating it all. Now I'm not so sure. He could already have hidden away all the evidence and made sure nobody can do a thing. He looked devastated. The lines etched on his face made him look older, and his tight mouth and downcast eyes were the picture of sorrow. The sheriff can try as hard as he likes, but we'll find a way. I'll dang well make sure we clear your name and do right by your brother. Save. We'll clear your name and do right by your brother. Excuse me. Hollis looked up at me and his eyes were clearer. He seemed to be choked for words. This is my fight now, too. I can't tell you how grateful I am, Lee. Hollis stopped speaking for a moment and took a deep breath. I really, really appreciate you. You showed up here in Golders Rock to get your man Bill. But then out of nowhere, you've been helping me out instead, putting aside what you came to do and I can't express it. Well, we're kind of tied up too. We can't leave this town until we're innocent. I ain't had a friend in a very long time. By instinct, I reached across and clapped him on the shoulder with a smile. I knew what he was trying to say. I ain't had a friend in a real long time neither. So I'm glad I've got one now. We're gonna stick together, work this case out, and ain't no sheriff or anyone else gonna stop us. Hollis nodded, still too overcome to speak. I found myself more and more drawn to him, in spite of every sense I had telling me I shouldn't. Sure, he might have come on to me when he was pass out drunk, but that didn't mean nothing for real. That didn't mean nothing real. Reality was, he was a broken, lonely, grieving man who needed a friend to support him. I was dang well going to be that man and put my personal feelings to the side. It was surprising to even be able to admit to myself that I had him. I hadn't done that since I met Jimmy. Perhaps it was a sign that putting Bill aside, and by proxy, putting Jimmy aside for now to focus on someone else's problems for once, was helping me move on as well. Hey, how about you show me how to play that song? The one that was playing in here the other day. I really like that song. Hollis smiled at me, his eyes shining, and nodded. Alright. It's hard though, so don't expect to get it right away. That's alright. Things take time after all. They really do be taking time. Hollis finished his drink and stood up, putting his glass down on the side. Not bringing more whiskey in this time? Nah, don't fancy it. I raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment further. Hollis not being in the mood for alcohol was a first since I'd known him. Like 3 days ago. I chose to take that as a very good sign. A very, very good sign. We headed back into the back room, and for the next few hours we went back over what he showed me the other day. It was hard to remember all the different notes and keys, which keys played what sounds, but I reckoned I'd got a dozen half memorized. I felt myself breaking into a grin as I clumsily tapped out the first few notes of the song. It weren't much, but Lord knew it didn't sound good. But it felt good to be able to do something I thought I'd never had a chance to learn. Especially when I saw Hollis watching me play with pride in his gaze. I finally stumbled out the last few notes and let the piano fall silent under Hollis's gentle gaze. Brilliant. That was brilliant. I don't know about that. It didn't sound nothing like the phonograph. Yeah, but you've been playing 2 days. You could be real good at this if you gave it time. I shrugged sadly. I probably won't have no time. After we solve your brother's case, well, I've got to get on the road to get Bill. And I don't know where I'll end up after that. Probably nowhere with a piano, that's for sure. Hollis looked a little sad at that. Maybe he thought I would stick around here. I couldn't rightly say I hadn't considered it, but while I was fine doing ranch work to fill the gaps, I'd find myself getting antsy before too long. I'd never liked to tie myself down. Their size difference is significant. I sat back on the chair and relaxed my hands by my sides. You know, since the rift between me and Earl, I hadn't never had nobody take my side. I didn't want him to. I mean, I didn't want folk to turn on Earl. But it would have been nice if I had someone to talk to the last 10 years. I had my ranch boys, but they turned up, got paid, and left. I think I've grown a little bitter, a little standoffish, you know? I shrugged. You weren't wrong. You were somewhat short with me when we first met, but that ain't who you are, at least not from what I've seen. So often, folk assume that just because someone's irritable, it means he don't want company, and they stay away. But I've always found it's those people that want it the most. That why you stuck around? No. I answered honestly and looked him in the eye. I stuck around because you're the only man in this town who seems to speak a lick of sense. Being testy ain't enough to scare me off, and when the dust settled, it seemed that throwing in my lot with you was the best bet I had. Since then, well, you said it before, we're pals. We're just a pair of besties. Hollis's stare was steady. Made me feel a little nervous how close he was. I remember last night how it tasted to kiss him and had to force myself to focus on something else. I wish it'd been different. All this was caused by my disagreement with Earl. If I'd not been so stubborn, if I just let him have his way, then maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe I'd even still have my brother. His voice was full of raw emotion and regret. I knew well the feeling of sitting there thinking about what you could have done or might have done different. The nights I'd spent wondering if I could have saved Jimmy's life. But when it came down to it, the answer was always the same. It didn't matter if I could have or might have done something different. In the end, I hadn't. Couldn't say that to Hollis right now, though, not in such a plain manner. He was grieving and distraught, and it was all still fresh. Not to mention, I still knew next to nothing about what it was that actually drove him apart. I formed my next words carefully. I hate nothing to regret about that. Maybe things could have been different. What was the context? What was the last? Maybe I'd still have my brother if I hadn't been so stubborn. Ain't nothing to regret about that. Just caused my disagreement. I wish it'd been different. Maybe things could have been different. Ain't nothing to regret about that. Maybe things could have been different. I don't know. I'm not feeling both of these answers. Maybe things could have been different. But who's to say they would have been any better? Hollis sighed and put a hand over his face. You're right. Dwelling on the past ain't gonna help us in the present. And changing one thing back then, well, who knows where we'd be right now. At the time, I did what I thought was right. That's gotta be enough. We were still sitting beside each other, and Hollis was real close now. So close, the smell of his cologne was overpowering, and its woody scent made me ache in all the wrong places. This wasn't the time to be feeling this way. Smelling his man musk cologne. I had to focus on something, anything else, other than the memory of him lying on the bed, beckoning me. I forced the image out of my head, trying to think of Jimmy, but I couldn't even remember his face. Hollis's voice brought me mercifully back to the present. I didn't forget, you know. Eh? I realized I'd had my eyes shut and opened them to see Hollis's face right in front of mine. I could trace every line with my eyes, see where he'd got faint razor marks on his chin, and count every strand of hair across his forehead. The woody scent he carried surrounded me and made me giddy. Not giddy. Last night. Oh! I remember everything. I just didn't know how to bring it up with you till now. In the dark, alone. You pushed me away. You said you wouldn't get in bed with a man who didn't rightly know what he was doing. I swallowed. I was sure he'd forgot. Gulp. Well, I'm sober now. So, was that your only objection? His eyes flickered down to my mouth and it went dry immediately. Look, Hollis. You're not into this? Because from what I can see, you want this as much as I do. Yes, smirk, smug. My heart was racing 100 miles an hour. Hollis knows. Hollis knows what you are, McCarthy. This is all a bit. I mean, that ain't to say I'm a prude or nothing, but you're pretty forward with it all. I just ain't used to it. Surprisingly, he didn't move back even an inch. Instead, he shrugged and grinned. Men like me have to take our pleasure where we can find it, Lee. Ain't often that I have a chance to make something like this happen. Okay! He's a go-getter. I like you, and there's something here, and that's enough for me. Is it enough for you? Swallowing, my eyes moved over his face one last time. Normally, I wasn't impulsive as a rule, but this spark between us made it feel less like an impulse and more like an inevitability. Oh! I followed my instinct and pressed forward, catching him in a bruising kiss. What, did you just like headbutt him with your lips? He eagerly reciprocated, his body pushing against mine, his hands gripping my sides firmly. His tongue explored my mouth, and with it came the taste I'd come to crave. The sultry, masculine mix of smoke and whiskey that so defined him. I felt a hand running over my cheek and let out a small, involuntary groan at his touch. God dang, it had been a long time since someone had touched me so tender like that. He drew back, both of us out of breath, and locked eyes with me. You're like something I never experienced before, Lee. You light this fire in my belly that won't go out. I need you. Carnally. I need to touch you all over and make you mine. I knew what he was feeling. I could feel the same intense attraction to him. It was like a current coursing through me. It had been such a long time since I'd done this, and even longer since I'd felt anything close to what I was feeling right now. The lust in his eyes as they raked over me made my manhood twitch. I knew I owed it to myself, but at the same time, Hollis was my boss and we were under the same roof. Starting this was risking a lot. Yeah. Excuse me. We shouldn't be doing this. You're my boss. I'll be danged, but God, do I want you to. We shouldn't be doing this. You're my boss. Like in every freaking drama. Hollis grinned real wide. I'd fire you here on the spot if that was the only reason you'd say no. So tell me again, Lee, do you want me or don't you? He knew. Dang it, of course I want you. But I'm an employee, and we're living in the same house, so don't you think... Sekuhara. Hollis silenced me with a finger over my lips. Ain't no worries about that. This is quid pro quo, bro. Where's HR? Just let this be what it is. I want you and you want me, and that's all it's gotta be. As he spoke, his breath ghosted over me and gave me goosebumps. I don't know what you've done to me. I've never wanted a man so much in my entire life. And I didn't want to let you get away before getting a taste. I kissed him, briefly, catching him for a moment before pulling away ever so slightly, teasing. There's a taste. Okay, McCarthy playing games. Still want to make me yours? Hollis growled deep in his throat, making a real possessive, masculine sound. He grabbed me and pulled me in hard, closing the gap between us, connecting our lips forcefully, pressing his body into me with need. I was taken by surprise, but my body reacted before my mind did. My hands grasping his hips and my tongue finding his. He was dominant and firm, pinning me down with a strength I hadn't realized he had. Where is the CG? My hands roamed downwards, and I teasingly brushed one over the significant lump that had formed in his pants, just barely grazing it enough to make him groan. He pulled back and choked out a command in a raspy voice. A command? Huh? Bedroom. That's not the command I thought. I stood and obediently followed, my insides on fire, my pants uncomfortably tight, and my head fuzzy with the scent and taste of it. Flourished, yes, sir. Yes, boss. Oh no. Yes, boss. He slammed the door shut behind us and pushed me up against it, finding my mouth again in the dark and claiming it for his own. Oh, we're just in the dark. Okay. It was rough and dang sexy. I hadn't felt so desired in years. There's the CG! Soon enough, we fell onto the bed, and I ran my hands along his chest in the haze of passion. His thick muscles spoke of the hard labor of a ranch owner. Though he had a slight paunch, probably as a result of the alcohol, his arms were taut and strong. Throw McCarthy around! He pushed me into the bed further, his lips assaulting my neck and leaving a blazing trail. I heard him groan as my fingers brushed under the top of his pants and bucked into me. At this rate, I was beginning to worry I might not last too long. This was unlike any sexual encounter I'd ever had. Hollis was demanding and passionate, and it made me feel like he was relishing every second. I'm just, admiring the shading on McCarthy's hair right now. Then, without warning, he suddenly grabbed a hold of my belt and ripped it away, desperately unbuttoning my pants. I exhaled in relief as the uncomfortable strain vanished, and Hollis pulled the fabric down to my ankles. He paused, and for a second, the passion and desire that was driving me faltered. Was he disappointed? Then he quirked an eyebrow, leaned over my body, and his head started traveling southward. Boss? 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 We didn't go to sleep for hours, and I had the best night I'd had in a real long time. Cut to black. Fade to black. TOS. Fade to black. Flourished. Boss? I woke the next morning buck naked, feeling groggy, and it took a second to recall where I was. I like that dynamic, though. I fallen asleep in Hollis's bed straight after round 3. What? You weren't nowhere to be seen, and judging by the light outside, it was later than I'd usually wake up. Phew. Phew indeed. Rolling over, I noticed a scrap of paper sitting on the desk by the bedside. Did we get another threat? Oh wait, no, it's probably a note from him. For a minute, I was scared it was another one of those notes like the one I got at Jet's. When I opened it, though, it was in Hollis's neat cursive. He writes in cursive? I've gone to town to run some errands today. I'll be back later on. Got some things to think over. H. Much to think about. Well, I was glad he left a note at least. I had a lot to be getting on with as well, and it was already later than I would have liked to start working. Wincing at the significant ache in my behind, okay, I pulled myself out of bed and got dressed, pushed all that happened between us to the back of my mind. Oh, I know McCarthy was thrown around. I'd talk about it later with Hollis. Or I wouldn't, and it'd just be a heck of a fun memory. I was fine with either one. At least, that's what I chose to tell myself, ignoring the sinking feeling in my heart. The falling action. I spent most of the day busying myself around the ranch, processing what had happened between Hollis and me. It had been a wild time and certainly a lot of fun. That was the way it went for most guys like us. You had one night of good fun and moved on. We weren't really supposed to be together, after all, so it wasn't like you could just settle down into domestic bliss. Even with Jimmy, who had been so much more than that to me, it had been hard keeping it a secret, stopping the rumors from flying around town. Would I even want that with Hollis? For sure, last night, there had been a spark I hadn't felt in 8 long years. But that wasn't to say Hollis wanted any more with me than even if he did, I didn't know how we'd make that work. Better not to think on it much more. Take it for what it was, a night putting 4 quarters on the spit with an experienced partner. Okay, it was always better to forget Any feelings you might or might not have had. Wait. It was always better to forget any feelings you might or might not have when it came to sex. At the end of the day, dusk had broken, and Hollis still weren't back. It wasn't like I thought he was avoiding me or anything. Heck, this was his ranch. If he wanted, he could have come back and ordered me away, and I'd have to go. It's our ranch now, buddy. He must have gotten caught up with his errands in town. Either that, or he spent the afternoon in the saloon. Just as I was settling down with a whiskey after a long day, I heard the door open and the object of my thoughts entered the room. Howdy, Lee. Howdy yourself. Everything all right? You look hurried. Hollis was out of breath, and he had a kind of rattled look about him, like he was being chased or something. Everything's fine. I gotta tell you something, Lee. He sat down opposite, and I handed him the glass of whiskey I'd poured myself. Looked like he needed it more than I did. He gulped it down with a nod of thanks. What's occurred? I heard a rumor about town today, a particularly nasty one that's got me a bit riled up. I felt a flare of anger. Folk had no right to be treating Hollis this way, innocent until proven guilty. What was it? Tell me what they said about you. I'll make sure they shut their mouth. It's gonna be about us, right? No, nothing about me, actually. Oh, then why's it got you all? I gestured to a general state of flappiness. It was about an old acquaintance of mine and Earl's. Her name's Nancy. Nancy! She was seen about town a few weeks ago, apparently, but nobody's sure it was her. Well, the blacksmith's apprentice told me today that he knew for sure it was Nancy because she used to babysit him as a young'un. Sitting down, I waited for Hollis to continue. It sounded like this Nancy could be an important part of the mystery. Hollis got up and paced in front of me, too nervous to sit, while he rattled on. If Nancy was really in town, well, her and Earl and I, she didn't part on the best terms with either of us. So Nancy knew Earl too? Hollis sighed. Nancy was Earl's wife. She ran off and left him 5 years past. None of us have seen her since. Till now, a few days before Earl died. Dun dun dun! The drama! Hollis stopped pacing and stood still, tapping his foot on the floor. So you think she might have... I don't know. You see, Lee, there's more to this whole thing. The reason Earl and I stopped talking in the first place, it was all 'cause of Nancy. Of course it was. For some reason, I felt a cold shiver rush through me and settle like a stone in my stomach. Nancy and Hollis? Had he been the reason she ran away? Or was he supposed to marry her, but she left him for the elder brother? Imagining him with some woman didn't sit right with me. Still, I had to know. This was an important part of Hollis's past, and one I'd been wondering about for a while now. Did I just skip something? Besides, I had no right to jealousy in any case. Hollis weren't mine to be jealous over. Excuse me. Care to explain the whole story? As Hollis was about to open his mouth again, there was a sharp rap on the door. Hollis, open up! Hollis and I exchanged a glance. Cartwright? I mouthed. He shrugged and headed over to the door, opened it to reveal an irritated-looking sheriff. Evening, Hollis. His greeting toward me was a little more stiff as he nodded over into the parlor. McCarthy? Good evening, Sheriff. To what do we owe the pleasure of this visit? Cartwright sighed. Hold on, I need more water. Ooh, I needed a lot of water apparently. Okay. Afraid it ain't no pleasure, Hollis. He drew out a pair of handcuffs from his belt, and my eyes widened as I realized what was about to happen. I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of your brother, Mayor Earl Dalton. I'd like you to kindly follow me to the station where you'll be questioned. I trust with a man like you, I'll have no difficulties. Before Hollis could answer, I stood lightning quick and confronted the sheriff. Whoa, on what evidence? Excuse me. You've got nothing to incriminate Hollis, or you would have had him in irons days ago. Hollis's glance at me was inscrutable. The sheriff was exasperated. New evidence has come to light, submitted by a witness who wished to remain anonymous. I'll be keeping Hollis here at the station until I can get to the bottom of it. What's the evidence? Tell us. I don't have to tell you nothing, Greenhorn. Shut up and sit down, unless you want charges for obstruction of justice. Seething, I bit my tongue because there weren't much else I could do. I shot a look at Hollis, and to my surprise, he seemed calmer than he had just earlier, almost accepting. So it's come to this. Alright, Cartwright, clap me in irons. He held out his wrists obediently, and the sheriff closed the handcuffs around him with a clink. How can you let him do this, Hollis? You're innocent. Hollis shrugged. He'll do it either way. Better to go quietly than make a fuss. You could learn a thing or two from your boss, McCarthy. Alright, let's get going. Almost as soon as he'd come, Hollis was suddenly gone. Gotta find Nancy. I saw him walk over and sit atop the sheriff's horse, which was calmly waiting in the yard. He smiled at me sadly as the sheriff mounted in front of him, and I watched until the both of them were out of sight. One thing I knew, this was BS. Hollis is about to tell me all about this Nancy person, and the sheriff just happens to show up and take him away? Maybe he wasn't involved with her somehow, or she'd pay him to kill off the mayor. Seized by a sudden thought, I dashed over to the desk and started ruffling through the documents Hollis had left splayed out there. There was a ton of stuff from the bank, various account statements, legal notices, letters, and buried underneath it all, what I had been hoping to find, Dalton's last will and testament. Flipping it open, I sat down in a chair and read it. It seemed that everything Dalton owned, bar nothing, had been left to Hollis. Nancy wasn't even mentioned as a footnote. I slammed the paper down, confused. Surely that'd be the key. Nancy orchestrating this whole thing in an attempt to grab cash from her ex-husband. Could it be she didn't know about the change in his will? Had Dalton died for nothing? Or did this all circle back to the sheriff again somehow, and I was chasing a red herring? I stood up and paced about in frustration. There had to be something here I just wasn't seeing, and now Hollis was in jail. The urgency had become critical. If the sheriff really was involved in this, he wouldn't hesitate to declare him guilty on some fabricated evidence. I had to stop that from happening. The clue had to be at the house. The sheriff had been so insistent about not wanting me to be there. Well, with Cartwright tied up interrogating Hollis, I could go where I pleased. I pulled on my boots and hurried out into the gathering dark. Excuse me. It didn't take long to get round to Dalton's old place. The tall iron railings looked sinister in the twilight. The whole house took on a kind of spooky vibe after dark, though that could have just been the knowledge that a man died there. I tried the gate again, but as predicted, it was locked tight. Desperate, I looked up and down to see if there were any trees or anything close to the perimeter that I could use to vault over. Sadly, it seemed Dalton had done a good job protecting his property. I couldn't see any way in. I wandered around to the back of the house, where the window was, hoping somehow I'd missed something last time. It was difficult to see in this light, and getting harder every minute. Something was off around here, though. The cloth. That scrap of cloth would have been there, caught on the windowsill. It was gone. I peered through the railings and looked all over the grass, thinking it might have fallen or been carried down by the wind, but it was nowhere to be seen. Dang, so between yesterday and today, someone had been in there and removed it. Evidence was most definitely being hidden. The question was, by whom? Whomstava? Cartwright seemed the most obvious suspect, but Nancy could have also had a key to the house that she kept herself. If Cartwright did it, then following the trail out to where I'd found him the other day might lead to more answers. If it had been Nancy, though, then I might get more answers from the people around town who'd seen what she was doing here. I had to choose who to investigate, and time was running out. Ruh-roh. I'm gonna save. My first instinct is to check the desert. Head out to the desert and track down what the sheriff was tied up to. The sheriff was the most obvious lead, and something had definitely seemed suspicious when I had met him out there the other day. Going back to town would take too long. I had to trust my gut. I headed out past the mayor's fence and towards the direction I'd gone before. It was difficult to remember exactly the way I'd gone, given I was lost in thought before. But peering through the darkness, I eventually managed to locate the rocky outcrop that the sheriff had been standing by. I made my way over to it, night now fully set in and with only the half moon to guide me. There didn't seem to be anything suspicious about the rock itself. It was just a standard boulder, like any you'd find in the desert out here. I searched around fruitlessly for a while before deciding I wasn't going to get anything done. This had been a huge waste of time. Just as I turned to leave, though, I noticed a little bit of packed earth, slightly harder than the rest of the dust around it. More and more, it formed a trail, leading deep into the desert. It looked like a footpath someone had used frequently, so much so that it had become compressed. Well, there was no better place to start. For a moment, I was a little concerned about the possibility of running into coyotes. It'd be hard to aim in the dark. Then I remembered Hollis telling me there weren't no coyotes around here and decided to throw caution to the wind. I was against the clock after all. I barreled down the trail. This one's for you, Hollis. I didn't encounter another soul, not even a prairie dog or a buzzard. It was eerie, being out in the desert at night all alone. When I had done this before, it'd always been with at least 2 or 3 other guys, or at the very least, a dog. I tried not to let it get to me and hurried forward. Soon enough, I heard faint sounds drifting from up ahead. Hurrying towards the source, my eyes picked up a flickering light way in the distance. People? Could it be? As I approached and started to make out individual voices, my fears were confirmed. Bill. Bill. I had recognized his deep, rasping drawl anywhere. Ew. Ruh-roh. Down in a little gully below was a dear old farmhouse, and the fire was set in front of it. I couldn't make out what Bill was saying yet, but as I crept closer, I could make out several figures by the firelight. This was definitely where they were camping out. I strained to see if I recognized any of them. There was Bill. The black hat and red neckerchief gave him away, which I could just see by the fire. The sight of him made me curl my fists in anger, but I forced myself to keep calm. This wasn't about me and Bill, not right now. Behind him, there were a few of his thugs, none of whom I knew by name. And a woman. Flaming red hair the color of sunset, tied up in a neat bun. It had to be her. It had to be. She was sitting real close to Wild Bill, and as I watched, she shuffled up and climbed into his lap. He relaxed backwards, allowing her to sit on top of him, and she giggled, real high and shrill. Though it disgusted me, I watched as Bill groped her with an easy smile in front of all the men sitting around the fire. Then he roughly pushed her off him and stood up. Not now, Nancy. Gotta be ready for later. Nancy. There it was. She'd run off and left Dalton 5 years ago. To be with Wild Bill? It was true that the last time I'd seen Bill and his posse had been more than 6 years ago, so he could have picked up a girl in that time. Question was, why had they returned here to kill Dalton? If Nancy thought she was getting an inheritance from him, then Bill might have come for a share of the money. It seemed unlikely, though. While Bill always chose particular targets, and killing a mayor for money seemed risky even for him. Maybe she wanted to get married, so she asked him to offer her ex-husband to make her a widow. That had several holes in it, though. First, I didn't for a second believe that he could be in love with her. People like Bill were incapable of love. Second, they couldn't get married even if Dalton died because Bill was a wanted outlaw. And third, it didn't explain why they were still here. This did bring one important thing to bear. As shifty as I thought Cartwright was, there's no way a sheriff as dedicated as he would work with Wild Bill. I knew that for a fact. So if Nancy had Cartwright on her side, she was playing them both. I watched as Nancy tried once again to cuddle up to Bill, but he uninterestedly conversed with the man across from him. Something really didn't add up here. Regardless, I'd found her. I'd found Bill. Surely, if I brought this to the sheriff, he'd have to release Hollis. Or at the very least, I could convince the townsfolk to listen to what I had to say. Determinedly, I snuck down from my vantage point and headed quickly back towards town. Got him! Not till I was halfway back did it occur to me that at no stage had I ever thought of just shooting Bill and taking the bounty. Only a few days had passed, but my focus had already shifted onto someone else. It was a strange feeling, but one I welcomed. I liked caring about someone living for a change. Soon enough, I was back at the boulder and skidded round it, heading in the direction of the mayor's house. From there, I'd be able to make my way to the sheriff's station. As I passed the fence, though, I glanced over at the house and something made my something made me stop short. The gate was open. Not a couple hours earlier, it had been locked tight, but now the entrance was wide open. Who in the heck? Cartwright. It had to be. Nobody else had the key. But then, where was Hollis? Was he not interrogating him at the station? Had he already decided he was guilty? If he had, why was he here at the crime scene? Nothing added up, and everything stank of a trap. Still, I had no choice. If I wanted to clear Hollis's name for good, the key was somewhere inside that house. It had to be. I took a deep breath and barreled on past the gate and in through the front door. With my hand on my revolver, I cautiously lit a sconce in the main corridor, flooding the place with light. It was dark, eerie, and empty as expected. Wouldn't be easy finding evidence in this place, but I was dang well going to try. Sheriff! McCarthy. The sheriff's cold voice from behind me stopped me short, and I squeezed my eyes shut in a grimace. I'd been right. It was a trap. I told you, repeatedly, to keep your nose the heck out and let me do my job. I've warned you to stay away from here. You have 3 seconds to start talking, or I'll have you arrested alongside your friend as an accomplice. I held my hands up in surrender and turned round to face him. His gun was trained right on my chest. Alright. Look, Sheriff, you've got the wrong man. Cartwright looked skeptical and laughed in a derisive tone. Oh, I have I? Well, why don't you tell me all about how I got this wrong? 'Cause from where I'm standing, it looks pretty clean cut. How could I do this? I had to give him enough to let me go, yet not so much that if he was involved, he'd just kill me there and then for knowing too much. Where do I draw the line? 3. Okay. Look, Wild Bill's behind this. I heard that Nancy Dalton was in town recently, and when you took Hollis away, I knew he was innocent. I decided to start looking for clues. I found out that Nancy Dalton left her husband for Wild Bill 5 years ago. She's here with him now, and I'm sure somehow he's connected to this whole thing. I just needed more time to figure it out exactly. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. I grew exasperated and practically shouted my last sentence. It ain't right that you've got Hollis locked up. He ain't the man you're after. Wild Bill needs to answer for his crime. It ain't right. He ain't the man you're after. Well, well, a true friend to the end. Admirable as that sentiment is, I'm inclined not to believe you. A stranger who wandered coincidentally into our town the night the mayor died, over the empirical evidence I have already gathered. Therefore, I'll be placing you under arrest for suspicion of aiding and abetting a murder. Put your hands out in front of you. Seething, but knowing there was nothing more I could do, I held out my hands and allowed him to clap on the cuffs. Oh. Humiliated, I was frog-marched back to the sheriff's station. Mercifully, the path didn't take us past Dan Van's Rest. I wasn't sure I could deal with the entire town talking in whispers about me as well as Hollis. That'd be very difficult to undo. We're in the brig. The sheriff pushed me into the station and slammed the door shut. Alright, we won't be overheard in here. Suddenly, I felt the handcuffs click open and fall away, and the jail door gently slid open. I apologize for that, McCarthy. Don't know who could be listening out there, and I have to keep up appearances. What? Sheriff smiled. Don't catch on quick, do ya? Come on. Speechless, I followed him into an office at the back of the building. Lo and behold, Hollis was sitting calmly behind the desk with a drink. When he saw me, he sighed in relief. Cartwright stepped out and closed the door behind him, leaving the two of us alone. Lee, I didn't know if the sheriff would have been able to find you in time. What is this? I grew angry. Had Hollis been in on this the whole time? I'd been tricked, and it didn't feel good that I'd spend the last few hours running around in a panic for this man when he wasn't even in trouble. Hollis caught my mood immediately and held up his hands. It ain't what you think. I didn't know no more than you until Cartwright brought me in earlier. Look, sit. I sat opposite him, still wary but willing to hear what he had to say. We had it all wrong, Lee. Cartwright had everything in hand the whole time, and he's figured it out. He brought me in here to brief me, and when I heard the plan, I had him come out to find you, because I'll need your help. The plan? Look, Wild Bill's the one who did this. You ain't gonna go chasing after him, are you? Let me start at the beginning. Story time. Oh, Jesus. Hollis lit up a cigarette and offered me one, but I was still feeling too pent up and refused. He shrugged, seeming a little disappointed, but tossed the box on the desk and carried on. This is what I was going to tell you earlier. Nancy was mine and Earl's good friend growing up. Her parents worked at the ranch, and she was like a sister to us. Naturally, as we grew up, well, Earl didn't see her like a sister no more. She, though, had her eyes on, well, me. He seemed a little embarrassed at the thought, his face and ears flushing red. And women aren't my thing. I nodded, a smile threatening to twitch at the corner of my mouth. I kept rejecting her in small ways, hoping she'd get the message. It was a horrible time. Earl was desperately smitten with her, and she was sweet on me. Glossary! To be fond of, keen on, or in love with some object of affection. By the time we were both 25, I knew who I was and what I wanted, but she'd still not get the message. She still not got the message. I took her aside and told her straight out that I was giving the mitten to her. Giving the mitten. A rejection or dismissal, usually used in the context of relationships. To give the mitten is to reject a suitor or end a relationship. Not the mitten! Now, you don't know Nancy, but she isn't the type to take rejection very well at all. A shadow passed over Hollis's face as he recalled the next part. Despite myself, I always wanted to reach over to him. The next day, she announced her engagement to my brother. Now, Earl wasn't the most sensitive when it came to matters like this one, and he didn't have a clue that she'd been sweet on me all those years. He was just happy she was finally returning his feelings. I struggled for days with whether to tell Earl about it, but I decided I couldn't let him marry her without at least warning him. Unfortunately, I was kind of the black sheep in my family by then. No career, no formal education, our parents weren't best pleased with me. Earl thought I was jealous of his success and refused to listen to what I had to say. Not like this! No! He was a man in love, and nothing I said would change his mind about her. My heart broke for Hollis. It couldn't have been easy to tell your brother something like that. So I gave it up, hoping that at the very least she was sincere in her affections for Earl, no matter what she felt in the past. Apparently, though, it wasn't the case. The night before her wedding, Nancy came to find me. I tried to turn her away, but she was a woman alone, and I wasn't going to send her out into the dark. That was the biggest mistake I've probably ever made. She told me she was going to go through with the wedding, and this was my last chance to stop her. She said she still loved me and begged me to reconsider. She cried, she pleaded, she wailed. Nothing she could say could sway me, obviously, but I couldn't exactly tell her why. I knew if she found out, she'd spread it all around the town, and I planned to live here for a long time, so I didn't want that to happen. Bro, Nancy is a snake. She's a rat and a snake. He put his elbows on the desk and his face in the heels of his hands, covering his eyes. And then, of course, Earl came looking for her. She saw him coming in the door and took the opportunity to throw herself at me and tell Earl I was the one who started it. Earl punched me and left without a word. Come on, Earl. Believe in your brother, bro. I wasn't invited to the wedding. My parents never said another word to me, though they did leave me the ranch when my pa and my ma died a year later. I think Ma changed the will. She'd always been softer on me. Hollis sat up, dropping his hands from his face, and his eyes had taken on a misty quality as he gazed past me. Earl didn't speak to me at their funerals. When Nancy left him for a younger man a few years later, Earl still didn't reach out. She ruined their lives! No! I tried then. I sent him letters. I'd go to his house and I'd call him through the windows, but he didn't want to see me. Turns out he thought I was the one she left him for. Oh my god, Earl. You just had to talk to your brother, man. Come on. When it transpired that wasn't the case, he started to let me in a little. He still wouldn't accept what happened, though, and every time I tried to explain, he'd get angry at me for sticking to a lie. I hated listening to the story, but I could tell Hollis hated telling it even more. It was like watching it happening to him all over again, the emotions on his face giving away 1,000 words. I don't know if he really thought I was lying or not. Could be it was just injured pride, not wanting to really admit he'd made a mistake. That I could see. Emotional constipation be like. In any case, he took her out of his will, and over the last couple of years, we'd started talking again. Mainly about town matters, as I said before, but on occasion, personal stuff too. I never told him the real reason I didn't want Nancy, and I don't think he ever guessed. Maybe if I had, he'd have seen the truth, but I was too scared. I didn't know what he'd think of me. So I let it fester. I continued to see guys one by one in secret when the drovers would pass by the ranch, and I never came clean to him. I tried a few days before he died. I went to meet him, and I was going to tell him. But when I got there, he was stone drunk, and it was too hard to say. I bailed out, and that was the last time I ever saw him. So there you have it, my whole history with my brother and Nancy. Hollis sat back in his chair, his warm brown eyes focusing on me once again. Now we come on to the case. Cartwright knew from the outset it wasn't me, but he also knew it wasn't you. He actually conned onto the fact that Nancy had been around far quicker than we did and put two and two together. Earl had apparently told him a lot about it all. In any case, he tracked them to the camp and found out about her and Wild Bill. Having checked the records at the attorney's office, though, he found out that Nancy had known she wasn't in Earl's will. So why kill him, right? That's the rub. My brother was never their real target. My eyes widened as I recalled exactly who had been named in Dalton's will. Hollis nodded grimly. Yeah. Yeah, it was me. Nancy was going to use this as an opportunity to remove her husband from the equation, get revenge on the brother who rejected her, and pick up the money at the end of it all. Of course, she didn't want to get her hands dirty herself, so she asked her new boyfriend to do it for her, and he agreed on the condition he picked up some of the spoils. The second I signed those papers and took them to the bank this morning, I had a target painted on my head. They've probably been watching me, and the sheriff reckons they'll make their move tonight. So why won't he arrest them? The door opened behind me just as I spoke, and the weary Cartwright edged his way into the room, cradling a hot cup of coffee. I won't arrest them, because we've only got circumstantial evidence, and that ain't enough to convict a murder. Without Wild Bill tying Nancy to all this, she'll get away scot-free. That's why I couldn't let you go after him, Blackjack, not till I'd got what I needed out of him. I watched the sheriff with renewed respect as he sipped his drink. I've been irritated that he'd been holding me back, and highly suspicious of his motives, but he was a smart man, and he'd worked all this out before us, and stopped me interfering in the process. I apologize, Sheriff. Look, McCarthy, I know your type. Headstrong, barrels in doing the right thing without thinking. Ain't no reason to apologize for it. I expected you to try something of the sort. I know you'd probably suspected me, and I commend you for your dedication to upholding the law, even if your attempt nearly bungled the whole thing. I dropped my head and stared at the desk, flushing. Thankfully, it seemed the sheriff wasn't too concerned. Hollis was only watching on in amusement. In any case, we need to talk about the plan for tonight. I reckon they're going to come for Hollis, and you've got to be prepared. I'll be on standby, but I'm sure they have scouts, and if they see me too early, they won't go in. You've got to catch them in the act, and if you can, get a confession out of them. It's your job to keep Bill talking until I arrive. Can you do that, McCarthy? He looked up to me, his eyes, and nodded. Bill was the person I hated the most on the planet, but Hollis was quickly becoming the one I most cared for. I could deal with one for 10 minutes if it meant the other lived his life free. You bet I can, Sheriff. Good. Glad to hear you're useful for something. Let's get you both back to the ranch. And remember, do not shoot either of them until we have a confession. We're putting a lot on this chance that he'll confess. Like, who's to say Wild Bill won't shoot us all? Not unless your lives depend on it. Got it. Hollis nodded gravely as he scraped back his chair. We looked at each other and I knew this was it. The final confrontation, both his past and mine. After this, we'd both be set free. Almost there. It was a long walk back to the ranch, and neither of us said anything along the way. The sheriff tailed away behind us, hiding out in the brush at the town's edge, not wanting to be in plain sight. Hollis seemed to be caught up in his thoughts, no surprise after the story he had to recount earlier on. I was focusing on the fact that I was probably about to come face to face with Wild Bill. Wild Bill McCoy. I'm calling you out. And I'll come down to this. 8 years of pursuit. 8 years of hurt. I'd finally be able to do right by Jimmy. Though even as I thought of it, I wondered if I really was. Would Jimmy have wanted this? Would Jimmy have asked me to spend 8 years chasing a specter to avenge his memory? I tried not to think about it. At the time, Jimmy was the only thing in my life. The only thing I thought I'd ever care about, and I knew it was the right thing to do. As I had said to Hollis, there was no point having regrets. We arrived back at the ranch and let ourselves in, the somber silence growing to fill the space. Everything felt tense, and I didn't know what to say or how to act normal. It was Hollis what eventually broke the silence with a sigh. Long night, eh? You were telling me. Look, Lee, I really didn't know what the sheriff was doing. Was that what he'd been worried about? It's no odds, honestly. I know you didn't have a hand in that. You seemed to be visibly relieved, letting out a long breath. I thought maybe you hadn't forgiven me. Look, actually, I wanted to thank you as well. You told me a lot about yourself tonight, and, well, you didn't have to. So, thanks. Hollis laughed dryly. I'm sure half the town would tell you different versions once they realize you've taken up with me. Figured you might as well hear the truth first. Yeah, well, I'm glad I heard it from you. I realize I haven't exactly been forthcoming with my past. Truth is, 'cause there ain't much of it to tell. But I feel like you should know, since you told me all about you. You don't have to. No, but I want to. Hollis smiled then, and I smiled back. It felt like something warm blossomed in the room. I sat down in an armchair, and suddenly we had our easygoing air back. It was still tinged with an underlying tension, knowing what could happen at any minute, but the calm before the storm felt a lot calmer. I grew up on a farm way up north from here. They weren't much, and I left at the age of 13. My father told me if I left, I shouldn't bother going back, so I haven't never returned. I moved down south from town to town, doing odd jobs here and there. Eventually, I found myself in the city, where I met Jimmy. Hollis nodded in recognition. Your best friend. I chuckled humorlessly. My lover. Hollis's eyes widened, and he swallowed. You mean you two were long-term? Yeah, like a man and a woman. 4 years we were together. Hollis was almost in awe. You really fell in love? I smiled as I recalled Jimmy's laughing face and the way he'd hold me at night. Yeah, I loved Jimmy more than anything. He was the whole world to me. Dang. Hollis let out a low whistle. I can't imagine what it feels like. I've never loved a woman, and I didn't know it was possible. I mean, I haven't ever had the chance, I suppose. Men are always a one-shot thing, you know? Now, I get it. When you stay in one place, it ain't easy. Jimmy and I moved about a bit, place to place, and all in all, we didn't have too much trouble for it. Until Bill came along. Hollis's face fell. Are you ever scared, Lee? Scared? What of? Falling in love again. Losing it again. I considered the question. Well, for a long time, I didn't think of nothing but Jimmy. It'd been 8 years since he died, but I've done nothing but chase Bill, trying to get revenge. It seemed like the only thing I could do. But the time I had with Jimmy, I wouldn't never give up that feeling, no matter how bad it felt after, no matter how much I wish he were still here. The fact I wish he was still here goes to show how much I loved him, right? How much of a good time we had. So, if I were to fall in love again, well, I wouldn't be afraid of it. I'd enjoy every moment, just in case it ended too early, and I'd be happy while I could. Hollis watched me in rapture. It seemed he was really interested in this. I suppose for a man his age to have never been in love before, well, it'd be an interesting thing to hear about. I hope one day I'll find what you had. Save. Maybe you already felt it, but you didn't recognize it for what it was. It's hard to find, but when you do, it's worth it. It's worth it. If you find the right person to share it with, it's the best feeling in the world. It's not easy, especially for guys like us. But there's someone out there for everyone, no matter who you are. At least, that's what I believe. Hollis pondered thoughtfully. So, you still think there's a chance for me? Absolutely. We were interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. Hollis Dalton! Do you have some time for an old friend? Hollis ran to the door and gestured frantically for me to hide. It seemed like only Nancy had come, so perhaps it'd be better if I was invisible. I looked around and dashed behind one of the long, thick curtains. It'd have to do for now. I just had to hope they didn't look down at the floor and see my boots. Hollis swept the door open and Nancy Dalton sauntered in. Her flaming red hair was tied up neatly, and her perfect powdered face was schooled into an innocent expression. Hollis, it's been so long! She threw herself on him in a hug, and he awkwardly patted her back. Hold on, I need more water if I'm gonna read her lines. Phew! Alright. It was clear he didn't know what to do in this situation, and I felt awful for him. This woman was the cause of all the pain in his life, and yet he had to pretend he knew nothing about it. Nancy, what are you doing in town? I heard about Earl. Oh, isn't it awful? She began to walk across the room, and I panicked momentarily as she came close to my curtain. However, she walked straight past and towards the liquor cabinet. Yeah, I've been handling the fallout. I didn't expect you to come back. We may have had our differences, but he was still my husband, Hollis. I've as much right as you to be here. Just listening to her made me angry. Hollis stood, stoic and stone-faced, making me respect his temper all the more. What do you want at this time of night, Nancy? I was just about to hit the hay. Oh, don't be like that, Hollis. We're old friends, catching up. I'm sure your wife can wait a little longer for you. It was a leading statement, but to his credit, Hollis didn't take the bait. Look, Nancy, I appreciate the visit and all, but it's late. What are you doing here? Nancy sighed and rolled her eyes in a dramatic fashion. Can't I stop by to see an old friend without all these questions? Something in Hollis seemed to snap as he sat down abruptly in an armchair. Alright, fine. We'll play it your way. How have you been, Nancy? Very well, thank you. Nancy trilled her reply as she sat smoothly down, crossing her legs and batting her eyes in a suggestive manner opposite Hollis. It cannot be clearer that she was still very much trying to impress him. Some women really could not take being given the mitten. And how's the boyfriend? Right to the quick. Nancy's smile dropped in a flash. What do you mean? Well, you left Earl for some younger guy, didn't you? How is he? He's fine, thank you. But that's not why I'm here. I wanted to talk about us, Hollis. Us? Excuse me? Hollis tried not to look openly revolted as she leaned across and stroked his arm. Naturally. Look, I know you. You're a good man. Not British. The only... Hold on. The only reason you turned me down is because your brother was in love with me. We both know it. Earl's gone now. There's nothing standing between us. Nancy, She put her finger over his lips and smiled bewitchingly. There was no question she was a very beautiful woman, but everything about her, except her looks, gave me the chills. She had the same aura as a wild animal waiting to pounce. Look, Nancy, I'm flattered, but... She tried again to hush him, but this time, Hollis stood up angrily and batted her hand away. Nancy, I'm not in love with you. Please stop this. You and I were never meant to be. Nancy stood gobsmacked in the middle of the room. She clearly hadn't expected another rejection. In her mind, her late husband had been all that stood between them. However, it didn't take her long to recover, and her innocent smile morphed quickly into a sneer. Well, I have to say I'm disappointed. I had hoped you would reconsider after so long alone. It ain't all about being alone, Nancy. You ain't right for me, and I ain't right for you. That's all it is. There was another noise at the door, and all of a sudden, two things happened at once. Oh, God. Oh, hello. Nancy threw herself on Hollis and kissed him just as the door opened and Bill walked into the ranch. Oh my gosh, she's so... She's prepared. She'd be waiting on people walking in on her and Hollis just to throw herself at them. I had to hold back vomit as I saw Hollis push her off and wipe his mouth. Bill, thank God you're here. Bill McCoy could not have looked more bored. Oh my God. Same here, Bill. Oh, this is drama unfolding. You had your 5 minutes, Nancy. Let's get this done. He was assaulting me, didn't you see? Bill shrugged, unperturbed. Yeah, and? What of it? Aren't you gonna defend my honor? Bill raised an eyebrow at her. Nancy, you've been yourself around with half the guys in my posse just to get my attention. You think I'm gonna fall for that now with this poor sap? Dream on. Let's finish the job and leave. Nancy stood humiliated and angry, then huffed and turned defiantly to Hollis. Before you die, Hollis, you should know that I'm the one who had Earl killed. I was hoping you'd have me, but since you won't, you'll pay the price for rejecting me instead. Any last words? Bill trained his gun on Hollis, who was frozen to the spot. Bill is just like dead-eyed right now. He's just like lifting his arm with the gun pointed at Hollis while Nancy's having her little drama play out. And then Bill's just like, whatever. I knew he didn't carry a revolver. He had a rifle in the room, but he had no time to get it. And anyway, Cartwright had told us explicitly not to shoot either of them if it could be helped. Nancy's confession meant nothing until he was around to hear it. I knew it was my time to act, and before I could stop myself, I leapt out of hiding and trained my gun on Bill. All three of them turned to look at me, Hollis with relief, Nancy with surprise, and Bill with utter shock. Then, Bill started to laugh almost hysterically. McCarthy? Bill's gun had dropped away from Hollis momentarily, but I didn't flinch, carefully aiming my revolver with every movement Bill made. Eventually, he straightened up, his laughter dying away, replaced with a smug smile. Are you for real, McCarthy? You followed me all the way out here after I killed your last pathetic boyfriend, and now I'm gonna kill your next one right in front of your eyes. Oh, this just got good. I tried hard to keep my temper in check. Just a few more minutes, Jimmy. Just a few more minutes until the sheriff arrives. My temper, though, was nothing compared to Nancy's. She shrieked and turned to face Hollis, who still stood unmoving where Bill had repositioned his gun. Tell him it's not true, Hollis. How dare he insinuate something so foul? When Hollis didn't refute it, instead gritting his teeth and averting his gaze, she screamed again. Are you trying to say it's true? You're a... Finally, Hollis exploded. Yes, Nancy, I'm a expletive homosexual. I always have been. Why'd you think I kept rejecting you? I thought you were in love with someone else. I think I've been made a fool by a sod. Bro, that's a word in Baldur's Gate. Short form of sodomy, a homosexual. I don't know if they use that the same way in Baldur's Gate. A fine sod such as yourself is what they say. With a scream of rage, and before anyone could stop her, Nancy swiped the gun from Bill's hand and brought it up to Hollis's head. Oh, she was shaking with anger, and I knew instinctively she was going to fire. Bill was reaching for the gun, but he wasn't going to be quick enough. Hollis was frozen to the spot, his eyes widening in terror. Before I even thought about it, before I realized what was happening, I saw Jimmy's face in front of my eyes. And suddenly, I was in the air when I heard the shot. Then my shoulder exploded in pain and I crashed into the floor. Half conscious, I heard yelling and crying from above me, and dazedly I felt a hand touch my face. I opened my eyes and saw Hollis's face leaning over me, and behind him, Bill, about to strike. Look out! Hollis heard me and whipped around just in time to see Bill readying his gun once more. Quicker than I'd ever seen him move, he swept his leg under both of Bill's and sent the tall man toppling backward to the floor, cracking his head with an ugly sound on the floor. Then he grabbed my pistol, put his foot on Bill's stomach, and trained it at his forehead. Okay, he got moves. He was radiating a fierce inner strength I hadn't seen from him before. Nancy had collapsed in a heap, crying her eyes out, and didn't even attempt to reach for the gun. I was pretty sure she'd never shot nobody before. Luckily, it seemed like I was alive, at least for now. Freeze and put your hands in the air. Dude, freaking John Cartwright, you're so late. Cartwright strolled through the door, revolver at the ready, and surveyed the scene. I am a representative of the law, and I am placing you under arrest for... McCarthy, what happened to you? He took a bullet for me, Sheriff. Hollis's voice was shaky, and it sort of sunk in then. I hadn't I? I hadn't meant to. At least, I didn't think I did, but I had. All I had thought in that split second was that Jimmy had died, and I couldn't let Hollis die too. Did I? Was I in love with Hollis? My mind felt full at the thought, and even through the half-madness caused by the pain in my shoulder, I knew it was true. I did. The rough but gentle, lonely, misunderstood, adorably awkward man who was fire in the bedroom, had somehow taken over my heart. It's been 4 days. Then my shoulder throbbed and I was brought crashing back to reality. I groaned in pain and rolled over a little to try to relieve some of the agony. Nope, that was worse. I couldn't see much around me, but Hollis's face appeared and I felt myself being lifted into a sitting position. Blood was running down all over my clothes, and I grit my teeth as Cartwright knelt in front of me. Get some rubbing alcohol and get that bullet out, then get him cleaned up. Looks like you'll live, McCarthy. Should go see a doctor in the morning, though. A pair of boots walked past me, and Nancy's muffled sobs abruptly stopped. Seems Bill's out for the count. Good work. There was shuffling. Something heavy. Presumably, Bill was dragged out of the room. Then everyone vanished, except for Hollis, who never left my side. He carefully removed the bullet and bandaged up my shoulder, holding me down and pouring alcohol on it to make sure it didn't get infected. Even though I screamed and struggled, he held me fast. After, while he was carefully wrapping it, I felt exhaustion from the whole event hit me like a brick wall. Lee. I don't even know how to begin to thank you for what you did. It's all for me. His shoulders were shaking. We really did that, didn't we? Let's see. Having you alive is worth 10 times as much pain. Don't need to thank me. It's what any good man would have done. Let's go for the good route. Let's go for the good ending this time. It's what any good man... Don't need to thank me. It's what any good... No, let's go this way. It's what any good man would have done. Since this is my fault, I insist you stay until you healed. Please. Let me make it up to you. I tried to tell him he didn't need to make it up to me. That I'd done it because I loved him. But my eyes were heavy, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I couldn't form the words. And fade to black. And scene. The day after the attack, Hollis had come back with a receipt for Bill's bounty and told me he put it all into my bank account. How did he know my bank account? I told him I didn't know I had one, and he laughed and said I did now. A bank account. Huh. He had a doctor come to the ranch and check the wound, but thankfully, he'd done a good job of dressing and disinfecting it, so it would heal well. The next afternoon, my arm firmly up in a sling, I felt well enough to walk around a little. Since his confession, I hadn't brought up anything remotely romantic with Hollis again. He hadn't returned to the topic, and I didn't want to broach it myself. I was increasingly sure that what I'd felt was some sort of delirium brought on by the pain. I really thought I loved him, but as the days passed and I healed up and began work again, it faded more and more. He never propositioned me again either, and I think I was fine with that too. We'd had one wild night, and that was all I needed. Jimmy was resting in peace now that Bill had been brought to justice and I could move on properly. Well... The state held a funeral for Dalton the following week. I attended with Hollis, supporting him, and was surprised to see several folks from the town come up and offer their condolences in person. It seemed they felt guilty for suspecting him. It might not have been the best circumstance, but at least it got people talking to him again. Hollis ran in the mayoral elections the following month, but lost out on the votes to his opponent. Privately, I thought it was probably a good thing. Cartwright was there for now to keep him in check, but a radical mayor was the last thing a town like this needed. Hollis wasn't too disappointed neither. He kept to the ranch as he always had, and we settled into an easy routine. Some of the ranch boys even came back, asking for their jobs. Soon enough, life was back to normal. My shoulder ached for a long time after, but I didn't let it stop me working, or I'd have gone stir crazy. By the time my wound was almost fully healed, I felt like it was my time to move on. I've been around Golders Rock a long time, almost 3 months, and that was longer than I usually stayed any place. I packed up my bag and got everything ready to go, doing a final sweep around my room to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. Sure you gotta go? Hollis was leaning against the door frame with a sorrowful look. You know you won't be able to practice the piano no more if you leave. And you know I ain't gonna get no better without a real teacher. I already learned all the 3 songs you know. Must you be so harsh? I laughed and slung my bag over my back. My shoulder twinged, and I had to remember that it wouldn't ever really be the same. Still, I didn't regret for a moment what I did. You know, if you ever want to come back here, you're welcome anytime. Day or night, you show up, then this room's yours. I know. Thanks, Hollis. Hollis grinned and held out his hand, which I shook with a smile of my own. It felt strange to be departing here after so long, but it was definitely time to start the next chapter of my life. And I was sure that one day I'd stop back here and see Hollis again. After all, once you take a bullet for someone, you end up friends for life. Yay! Excuse me. The end. That's like the true end. Now we can go to the delusional end. Thanks for playing. You're welcome. I'm gonna get the delusional end now. Load. Having you alive is worth 10 times as much pain. Since this is my fault, I insist you stay until you're healed. Please, let me make it up to you. I tried to tell him he didn't need to make it up to me, that I'd done it because I loved him. Okay, same thing. Or maybe I didn't get enough points to get the good end. No, I feel like I should have. I feel like I did a lot of favorable choices. Put money into my bank account. I didn't know how to bank account. I did now. Huh. No, I didn't get enough points with him. Okay, hold on. Let's load from the beginning of his route and pick all the opposite options. Oh no. Load. This is not. Is this a choice? This is not a choice. This is just me saving. Okay, load. Alright, so we ended up with, I wouldn't say a bad end, and like a neutral end for, no, it's a pretty good end. Isn't this all a bit unusual? I prefer to stay at the saloon if it's all the same. Well, unusual or not, I'm telling you, I'd like you to live at the ranch. If you want employment, then you better listen to your boss. I made eye contact with Jed, who shrugged. Defeated, I had no choice but to agree. Alright, I'll just be a moment then. He's scowling at me. Follow Jed, leaving Hollis tapping his foot by the door. Okay, this should be the same, so we can skip. Watch your eyes. We're skipping to the next choice. Our threat. Oh my god, my eyes. We're drinking, we're playing the piano. A shame you two were driven so far apart. I think we did a lot. I think maybe we were like 50-50 or 40-30 on our choices. 40-30? 40-60 on our choices. So we might still get the neutral end at this, at the end of this. A cloud passed over his face and he sighed deeply, looking straight down at the floor. I always thought one day it'd be over. We'd be a family again. But now we never will. That's what's hardest to accept. There just wasn't enough time. I'll stop playing. Okay, he's crying, so we can skip. Oops. He did not have a lot of CGs in his route. Then again, I can't remember how many CGs were in Taza's route. The sheriff can try as hard as he likes, but we'll find a way. My words seemed to jog Hollis a little, and he smiled faintly. I'm glad to have you helping me, Lee. You're right. Between us, we'll find a way. Hollis stopped speaking for a moment and took a deep breath. I really appreciate you. Yes, this should be the same. Yes, we're helping you. You can't express it. Friend. Skip. Ain't nothing to regret about that. It's no use having regrets. You live the best you knew how, sticking to your guns and doing what you thought was right. Yeah, you're right. Everything I tried to do was for Earl's sake, and I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd done it any different. But it still hurts to think about, you know? I know. That never really goes away neither. You just sort of learn to shoulder it and keep going on. We were sitting beside each other and Hollis was real close now. Okay, this is the same now. Teehee, teehee. We should be doing this. You're my boss. I'll be danged, but God, do I want you to. Hollis grinned like a coyote about to eat a prairie dog. His gaze made me shudder and set a fire all over my skin. Dang, I was hoping you were gonna say that. I've been waiting for a chance to do this ever since you stepped through the door. Jesus Christ! His nose was almost brushing mine, hair tousled from our last kiss and his cheeks flushed. I moved even closer and spoke my question onto his lips. That long, As he spoke, his breath ghosted over me and gave me goosebumps. I don't know what you've done. Okay, this is the same. It's because we didn't tease him. It's because we were like, my boss? We can't. You're my boss. That was the, that was a tiebreaker that got us on the neutral route. Go back to town and ask about Nancy, I guess. It wouldn't do good running around the desert at this time, and besides, it wasn't certain there was even anything out there anyway. I'd be better off trying to find out more about who Nancy was and why'd she come back to town. Perhaps from there I could piece it all together. I turned on my heel and found my feet taking me toward the first place that came to mind, Dead Man's Rest. There were bound to be a lot of folks in there this time of night. One of them would surely be able to tell me something. I hurried across the town square toward the merrily lit building and swung open the doors. It was a ruckus inside as usual, with a loud card game going on at one of the far tables. Most of the men in town seemed to be caught up in it. Hey McCarthy! Oh my god, it's Jed! We do see him again, if we pick this option. I turned at the sound of my name to see Jed waving jovially from the bar. Well, it was as good a place as any to start. I made my way over to him and pulled up a stool. Hey, howdy, Jed. What can I get for you? Anything tonight, thanks? I was just hoping to ask you a couple things. Jed's eyebrow raised questioningly. Yeah? Yeah, it's about... I looked around furtively and lowered my voice for the next bit, even though it was probably unnecessary. Jed had to lean in and strain to hear me over the commotion going on at the back. Nancy Dalton! Jed's eyes almost bugged out of his head. Where did you hear about her? Hollis mentioned she'd been in town recently. I was wondering if you knew anything about it. Jed glanced around, then with a quick jerk of his head, motioned me over to the far side of the counter. Secrets? Telling secrets? Behind him was a little stockroom filled with kegs and various documents on a small desk. He closed the door and let out a breath. Couldn't think in there with all the noise. Then his serious gaze found mine. Right, before I say anything, I've got to ask what Hollis told you about Nancy. He used to come in here drinking a lot and said some things I don't think he knows I knows. I don't want to spill the beans on anything he wants to keep hidden. Very little. Just that she's Dalton's ex-wife, she ran off 5 years ago, and she was seen in town by the blacksmith's apprentice the other day. He thought it might have been connected to the murder. Jed nodded thoughtfully. So why is Hollis not asking about with you? I thought up a lie quickly on the spot and hoped it wasn't too obvious. He didn't think folk would want to talk to him. Asked me to do a reconnaissance job before he got involved. Jed raised an eyebrow again, but didn't comment. Well, I'll tell you what I know. Nancy was in town a few weeks back. Some people say they saw her visiting the bank, and apparently she also visited the attorney's office. The attorney's? Could that have been to do with the will? Perhaps she was finding out if she was still on it or trying to convince him to change it by coming back before she killed him. But that wasn't all. Come to think of it, Jed had his hands on his chin, rubbing thoughtfully. She was in town a few days ago, real late at night. It must have been about 2 nights before Dalton died. I didn't mention it to nobody because I didn't think much of it at the time, obviously. Now though, I can't believe I didn't remember before. She was walking towards the house. I called out because it was late and wondered if she wanted an escort there. Woman walking alone in town and all that. She said she was fine though, and that she was just going to collect something she left there. I wondered at the time, but thought it was none of my business, carrying on cleaning the outhouse. Jed shrugged. Maybe that's the information. Maybe that information's of some use to you. My mind was racing. Nancy in town, at the house, 2 days before Dalton died, asking at an attorney's office in the bank. Something was definitely fishy there. Yes it is. Thank you. I made to leave, but then paused at the door. Do you know why Nancy left 5 years ago? Jed had said he'd known something about Hollis that I didn't. I knew it wasn't my place to ask, but something inside me pulled at my heart, and I had to. I didn't really expect Jed to answer, so I was surprised when he smiled. Don't see no harm in telling you that. It's common knowledge around here. She ran off with a younger man. Only caught one glimpse of him on the day they left. Pretty tall, the silent, brooding kind of type. Wore a red neckerchief. I can't believe he remembered all these details. My heart froze. Red neckerchief? Did he have shoulder-length dark hair and a black Stetson by any chance? Now that you mention it, yeah. The neckerchief was all that stood out to me before, but yeah, he had a black hat on. Why? Do you know him? Yes. Oh, I knew him. In the worst possible way. All the pieces started clicking worryingly in place as the picture emerged before my eyes. Nancy had left her husband for Wild Bill McCoy. That at least explained why she was back in town. But what on earth was Bill doing, getting mixed up in something like this? It didn't seem like his style at all. I swallowed and turned back to Jed. Thanks for all the information, Jed. You're welcome. Oh, and by the way, I admire your loyalty. Hey? We all saw Hollis getting escorted to the sheriff's station about an hour past. We all saw, bro. Figured it wouldn't take him too long to bring Hollis in, evidence or no. I like a man who will stick by his friends, no matter what. Seems like I was right about you, McCarthy. My flesh, I'd been caught lying. I hope you'll understand why I said what I said. Of course, you were protecting your friend. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Hope you find who did it. Thanks, Jed. Okay, broski. I left the bar with Jed waving me off and headed straight out towards the mayor's house. Knowing what I now knew about Nancy, there was no way I could go straight to the sheriff. I had to find some evidence. I climbed that dang rail hand over foot if I had to. When I arrived there, though, what I saw caused me to stop short and stare. The gate was open. Then a couple hours earlier, it had been locked tight. Okay, yeah, this is the same. Skip. Wild Bill needs to answer for his crime. Let me save here. Wild Bill, just happens to be the very man you were so keen to go after upon your arrival. Could it be you're trying to save your friend by accusing a wanted outlaw in the hopes I'll allow you to go and kill him and call it closed? You'll have to try harder than that. I wasn't born yesterday. I'm placing you under arrest. I suggest you come quietly. And skip. He says psych. He said psych. That's a long story. Full of drama. Nancy. Maybe you already felt it, but you didn't recognize it for what it was. Hollis's brown eyes grew wider as he contemplated what I said. You're saying I could have been in love and never known? Well, yeah, maybe. It's like the person you're with sparks your soul in a way you didn't know about before. You want to hear everything they've got to say, and whatever you do, coming home to them after is what you look forward to. You ain't afraid to be open and trusting, knowing that they'll take care of you. And your heart thumps real loud and fast when you're intimate. Hollis was listening to my every word in rapt attention with a dawning realization on his face. He swallowed thickly. I think I've been in love. We were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door and starting drama. My name's Nancy. Oh my god, I've been shot. Having you alive is worth 10 times this much pain. Is it? Oh, it's the same ending? Okay, wait, hold on. Load. It was here. Okay, Hollis isn't the man. Blah, blah, blah. Skip. There ain't no way there's only one ending for Hollis. I don't believe that. But I am satisfied with that ending. Because it makes the most sense to me. Nancy. I've been shot times 3. Hollis took a deep breath, his brown eyes swimming above me. There we go. Lee. Without warning, his face grew closer and I closed my eyes as his lips found mine, as I'm bleeding out. My chest overflowed with some sensation as I savored his taste, sighing against him. Too soon, he drew away and left an ache I hadn't known existed. Hollis's voice above me was gentle and soft. I know what love is. It's this. It's you and me. The way you described it earlier, how you felt about Jimmy, and what love feels like. It matches perfectly what I didn't know how to express. I love you. I heard the shake in his tone and felt his hand tremble on the bandage as he said it. It must have taken a heck of a lot of courage to admit that to me after only a few days, literally like 4 days. I forced my drowsy mouth to work to form an answer I so desperately wanted him to hear. Love you too. I heard Hollis sigh above me, and as much as I tried to stay awake, my eyes were so heavy. I passed out before I could say anything else. McCarthy said he tried to form the words that Hollis wanted to hear. So when I woke up, Hollis was sitting by my side with a bowl of stew. I struggled to sit up, ignoring the howling protest in my shoulder. Hollis smiled when he saw I was awake. Howdy. Good afternoon. I made this for you. Doc's on the way. Don't need no doctor. You cleaned and bandaged it pretty well. Still, I want to be sure. You should be here within the hour. I took the stew from him and bounced it on my lap, struggling to eat it one-handed. Here, let me. Hollis took the spoon from me and carefully brought the bowl up, feeding me carefully. Sorry to be a trouble. He looked incredulous. A trouble? You saved my life, Lee. Nothing I can do for you will ever be enough to repay that. I grinned at him, and before he could react, leaned forward and stole a kiss from his slightly parted lips. There, now we're even. Hollis seemed completely unsure of himself. It was amazing to me that he could be so confident when it came to peruding and so naive about love. Because he'd really known what he was doing, that was for sure. I guess it all came down to experience. He'd had a lot of partners, but never a lover. He swallowed hard. Alright, even. I grinned and he resumed feeding me. I wasn't sure you'd remember what I said to you, just after it happened. The part where you told me you love me? Well, yeah. He was flushed all the way to his ears. You seemed pretty out of it, but you did say, well, that I love you too? That'd be 'cause I do. Now it was my turn to get choked up as I tried to get the words out. I haven't felt this way about nobody since Jimmy. Not in a long time. You're real special to me, Hollis, and I'm glad you feel the same way. Hollis's grin lit up, and a smile slowly crept over my face in return. I wasn't sure what it would feel like, but hearing you say that, I know for sure this is it. Will you stay here with me? I know you said you wanted to leave before, and if you still do, I understand. But I'd really love it if you'd stay here and keep working at the ranch. My brow furrowed in concern. Of course I wanted to stay with Hollis, but I knew how much he loved this town, and, well, men like us weren't exactly welcome in frontier America. If it was found out what we were doing, you'd be okay to risk that? What if folk get wagging tongues? Hollis sighed and looked at the floor. Then we'd ignore them, just like I've been ignoring what they say my whole life. And if they keep it up and force us out, well, I'd sell up and go anywhere, so as long as you was with me. I knew how much it taken out of him to say that. I hoped it would never come to that, but I also knew how folk could be. So I'd had to ask the question, to make sure I wasn't about to put us both through something that didn't have a clear shot. Well then, how could I walk away? It'd be worth settling down, to build a life with you here. And if it don't work out, then we'll build one somewhere else. So long as we take the piano. Hollis laughed and leaned in for another light kiss. I'm sure that can be arranged. Is that it? Okay, I was gonna say. Over the next few days, my arm healed considerably. The doctor had given me the all-clear infection-wise, and so long as I didn't use it much, the pain subsided quickly. Hollis worked himself hard about the ranch. Though I felt real bad watching him do it all, I knew he'd only be upset if I tried to help. The state held a funeral for Dalton, and I attended to support Hollis. Standing at the back, I held his hand discreetly as they lowered the body into the grave. Several townsfolk came up to apologize and offer their condolences. Hollis was surprised, and I was pleased that folk here seemed to be starting to turn their prejudice around. There's the other CG. My god, Hollis is so tiny. The ranch boys came asking for their jobs back, and life returned to how it was before Dalton's death. McCarthy do be looking good though. Soon enough, I was able to help with small jobs around the ranch, and a few months after the incident, I was back to almost full strength. Of course, my arm would never be quite the same again, but that was the price I gladly paid to have the man I loved beside me. YEEHAW! During the day, we'd work together on the ranch, the picture of professionalism to the outside world, a boss and his employee hard at work. Oh! Then in the evenings, we'd lock ourselves in the parlor, listening to music, drink, smoke, and talk the time away. Little did they know. And every night, in the secret little world of our bedroom, we'd have one heck of a good time, staying sure that nobody had ever had a love like ours. Okay. Hollis is so tiny. I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life enjoying it. I like the other ending better. It made more sense to me. It makes more sense to me. All right. Thanks for playing. You're welcome. Alright, that is it from me today. You could tell when my voice got shot and I started losing the accent. Alright, I'll be back Monday with more Baldur's Gate. And then whenever the next time I can impromptu stream is, I guess we'll just stream the next, we'll just play the next route available of Dead Man's Rest until we finish the game. Eventually. So thanks so much for watching, for lurking, commenting, all that good stuff. Remember to hydrate. Yes, thank you. I finished my water, so I'm kind of dehydrated and my throat needs more, so I'll definitely get more. You're quiet because you got a Nihongo study. You got this. I believe in you. You will beat down that, what's the acronym? JLPT, JPLT? Ganbatte, you got this. Alright, so we'll yeehaw another day. Otherwise, we'll come back Monday for not yeehaw. Arika, thank you. You're gonna beat that test up. Yes. I believe in you. You got this. Alright, thank you again. Have a good night, y'all. And good luck with your studies, Kiwi. Goodbye.